Welcome into the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Folks, what can I say? There's that white whale that sits out there, and every once in a while, you got to reach out and see if you can get it. And today, we got it. We have an unusual show for you today, folks. We have a show that I think we've been trying to get since our inception in 2013. A show that is not the show you think we're going to have today. I'll preface it that way. We are going to talk today about the serial killer of all serial killers, John Wayne Gacy, but not in the way you think we're going to talk about it. We have an unusual guest today, folks. We have defense attorney Karen Conti with us today. She's got a brand new book out there, folks. This book is called Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, Defending America's Most Evil Serial Killer on Death Row. Now, you may say, oh, that sounds good, Tim. Boy, are we going to get the scoop today. Well, we'll get the scoop. Trust me, you're going to get the scoop today. But this book is so much more than that, folks. It's so much more than that. This book does delve quite deeply into who John Wayne Gacy is, but it also delves into who Karen Conti is. And I want to stress something to you, folks. A lot of times there's a story within a story. And sometimes that story is so rich and so good that it takes you into a different place. The other thing we're going to delve into today is a subject that I really find fascinating, and that is the death penalty the penalty that we should be enforcing in America? Now, Karen brings this up in the book, and I find this subject fascinating as well. We all want our revenge. We all want the right penalty for the right crime. And when someone kills one of our loved ones, do we really want that eye for an eye? Karen brings this up in this book, and it's so eloquently put out there that, you know what, in this day and time, and she uses this in a poll. I think the number that she puts out there is 60% of people polled in this particular poll are now saying that they don't want an eye for an eye. They don't want the death penalty in this day and time, which is a majority, which is, to me, kind of fascinating. We're going to bring in Karen here in just a moment and talk about all these things. John Wayne Gacy, the story behind the story in Karen, and we're going to talk about whether we actually still need the death penalty in this day and time. Karen Conti has been a litigator and trial lawyer for 37 years, trying hundreds of cases and handling numerous high-profile and noteworthy cases across the country, including a U.S. Supreme Court appeal in a ballot access case on behalf of the Democratic Party. She obtained a reversal by the Illinois Supreme Court in favor of women's rights in the workplace and represented serial killer John Wayne Gacy in his final death row appeals. She also secured a large settlement in a wrongful arrest and injury suit against the Chicago Cubs and Los Angeles Dodgers, stemming from the May 2000 Wrigley Field brawl, and obtained a $1.2 million verdict as the lead trial attorney against one of the nation's largest home builders. She is licensed in Illinois, California, and is a certified mediator and collaborative lawyer. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in to True Crime Tuesday, Karen Conti. Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure, Karen. I appreciate it. You know, I told you off air, and I'll say it again, I was so pleased by the time I got to the end of this book that there was a different story within the story, and I got the complete story by the end of it. That this book was totally not what I was expecting. I think I went into this expecting to get to know John Wayne Gacy. I came out of it getting to know you. I came out of it getting to see a different side of the capital punishment argument. And I came out of it getting a well-rounded look at what happens on death row and what happens when families are affected, what happens when families of people who are convicted are affected, and what happens with the people who have to fight for people who are convicted are affected. You know, I never quite think of what happens with trial lawyers in this case, and I get to see from your eyes what happens when you get in the conundrum of okay, so here you are, one of the most, in our eyes, one of the most evil men who's walked the planet, and you've got to sidle up to him, and yet there's a thrill. I mean, there is a thrill. Let's face it. There's a thrill of having to represent him. There's being abhorred by what he's done, yet he's very gracious and he's very relatable. So you do learn to relate to him. Tell me, here's the question. I know I'm rambling on here, Karen, but the question here is, how do you balance it? And how do you come to terms with the fact that there eventually is going to be an end here?
Well, it's just, just so many things to unpack there.
Yes. Yeah.
We as lawyers we look at everything the same way. We do not judge. We're just a part of this system. Mm-hmm. And I've always said that if we do our jobs, the police do their jobs, prosecutors, judges, jurors, they all do their job, justice will get done. So I'm not there to make justice. That would be very arrogant to say that. Right. I'm there to make sure someone's convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they're going to execute him, they're going to execute him by means that are not cruel and unusual. And if we don't get these things right, then somebody else walks who's done the crime. Right? Mm-hmm. In Gacy's case, we didn't have that argument. I never argued for actual innocence. I was just arguing to stop the death penalty because I knew that once they executed Gacy, there were going to be others on death row that were going to be executed, and they may have good defenses like wrongful arrest, wrongful conviction, racist prosecution, or incompetent counsel, which many of them did. And as I talk about in my book, 15 years after Gacy was executed, we had 12 men walk off of death row on actual innocence, not technicalities, wow. And 12 were executed. So we were not batting very, very well there.
Yeah.
So and that led to the abolition of the death penalty in Illinois because we weren't getting it right. So this is my job. I go and I do it. And if execution is what happens, it happens. But he was entitled to a defense, and he was entitled, for me to lodge every single argument I possibly could. That's what I'm sworn under oath to do, to zealously advocate for my client. And in so doing, I have to find something that I care about with the client. I have to have empathy. I have to bond with the client. And listen, I represent people who beat their wives. I have represented companies that have made asbestos. I have represented companies that have poisoned water. This is what I do. Mm-hmm. So I'm not judging Gacy at all at this point. I'm trying to get a bond with him so I can do my job and get the best result possible. And guess what? Spoiler alert, I didn't get a very good result.
Yeah. Well, and I guess you can't really expect it when you've got the entire country against you, including the entire state, every judge that you faced, whether it be on a national level, a state level, whatever level you're facing, the entire world's against you. Spoiler alert again, Karen.
Well, and, I talk about how Sister Helen Brzezinski, who wrote Dead Man Walking, she's devoted her life to anti-capital punishment. And actually, she endorsed my book. But back then, she was in town and we were trying to come to see her talk. And she basically her people wouldn't give us tickets because it's going to be a bad optic. Right? That Gacy's lawyers are there. Oh, my God, Gacy's lawyers. That's the exception. Nobody deserves to be executed except John Gacy. So we, even among the people who should have been on our side, they weren't on our side during that time.
That's crazy. That is just crazy. I want to rewind a little bit. I want to learn a little bit about you, Karen, and where you grew up, how you grew up, and what got you to this point where you wanted to represent the people who may not be representable. Tell me a little bit about Karen Conti.
Well, I grew up in a very blue-collar neighborhood just west of the city of Chicago. Actually, my parents were both in show business, which was kind of an interesting background. But, I was always against the death penalty. I was just, as a kid, I have a part in my book, my father had to remind me that someone was being executed, and he heard that on the radio, and we were arguing. And I said, it'd be like if I didn't clean up my room and you punished me by messing up my room. Come on, Dad, does that make any sense? So, I was always arguing. So, I'm in the right profession expression.
Yeah.
But I never thought I'd ever use it. I never thought that I would do this kind of work. I never wanted to do this kind of work. It wasn't on my radar. So, but you have to pile that on with the idea that I was always interested in crime and Lizzie Borden and Jack the Ripper and Ted Bundy later on. And I used to read true crime. Ann Rule, to me, was one of the best authors ever when it came to true crime. So I was always curious, like a lot of us are, about what is that? What makes a person evil? What makes a person walk among us perfectly normal in one regard, and then in this little compartmentalized part of their life, they're doing some of the things that you can't even imagine thinking of doing, let alone doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with those two things, when the call came to represent Gacy or to go down and visit him, I really had no intention of doing anything other than meeting him because I was curious. Yeah. I wanted to see what it was to look at the epitome of evil. And so that's really how the whole process started.
And I get that. I get the curiousness. I get wanting to know and hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not so committal. Maybe there's a little bit of, I can back out. But when you step there into the Menard Correctional Facility, you're in, right? You know that there's no going back.
Well, and then you realized that what was kind of a lark and curiosity becomes something much more, which is Gacy's going to be executed. I mean, they're hell bent on executing him on the very day that his execution was set. And then the rest of these men on death row are next. And some of them didn't do as bad things as Gacy did. Some of them actually walked out of Menard several years later on actual innocence. So to me, it was an important cause. And when you are faced with that and you're tasked with, here, you can represent, a serial killer in his death row appeals and maybe make a move and maybe, as they say, move the needle, pardon the pun, but, that maybe I can make some arguments that will have some traction to help abolish the death penalty. Now, I didn't do any of that. I don't think I moved the needle at all. In fact, I probably moved it backwards when it comes to Gacy. But I think that you take on those challenges. It's whatever your poison is. Is it mountain climbing? You want to climb Everest? I'm a marathoner. I used to be a marathoner. So you want to take things to the extreme. And to me, this was the ultimate challenge from a legal standpoint.
Now, with Gacy, when you first meet him, he's kind of filling you out too, and at the same time, he doesn't necessarily know that he wants to take you on, right? He's kind of pushing back a little bit, so there is a little bit of a sales job on both ends, isn't there?
Well, it was so ridiculous because he had two really good death penalty lawyers, and my law partner and I posed to him, "Hey, let's get on this bandwagon. Let's help out. We've got resources. We've got some staff that can help out. We've got creativity. I can be your spokesperson because that's part of the whole game. We want to make sure that everyone knows what these arguments are, so we can change the public opinion. It's all part of doing death penalty work." And he kind of resisted, but he was oppositional in a lot of ways. I'm sure your listeners have met people, you say black, he says white. So it's like, John, this is in your best interest. You're going to die if we don't get this taken care of. Don't you want two additional lawyers? Doesn't that make sense? You're not paying us.
Yeah.
But we had to convince him. And I was the one who kind of had to cajole him into saying yes.
He's also got another issue here, which I find very odd, and that is that he's making money off a 900 number, and he's also making money off his paintings. Isn't that what it is? And then he's more concerned about wanting to keep his money and being able to use it and being able to, I don't know, what is it, give it to his relatives afterwards and not have to pay for his incarceration, which the state of Illinois is trying to make him do, rather than worry about, well, I'm going to die. I'm going to be executed. Can you walk us through that a little bit here, Karen, and tell us how you get his mind off that subject and say, hey, John, you really got to focus on the fact that you're going to die here.
Well, I think couple things are going on. The state sued him for room and board, and of course he said, "Well, just evict me." So that was his way of dealing with it. But he was mad. He was like, I'm living in this hellhole of a prison, and what? I'm supposed to pay for it. He didn't have much money. He was making a little bit of money that he would use in the commissary, mostly to protect himself. He would use his food and cigarettes or whatever to get a little protection, because it's not a very safe place.
Sure.
And so he wanted to fight it because he was just being oppositional. He wanted to fight the state. And he also was a big denier. He was a person who denied what he did was wrong. He denied at the end that he even did any of these crimes. So that was his way of coping. He never took responsibility for anything he did. He never, if he didn't like something that he did or that went wrong, he would lie about it and manipulate. So this is antisocial behavior. This is part and parcel. So, it didn't surprise me that he wanted to focus on something else rather than the death penalty, because he just didn't come to grips with it. And I would have conversations with him to prepare him for it, because I wanted to make sure he knew what was going to go on, and if he had his affairs in order, and if he was emotionally sound, because I thought that was part of my job, and he never really wanted to address that with me.
One of the things that's interesting in the book is it seems like of the two lawyers, he's got the two death penalty lawyers initially, then you and Greg, your husband, come in, and it seems like you two are making more headway with him personally than the other two were. The other two seem like they're kind of off here, and then, I've got those two lawyers, but you two are visiting him and you're making headway with him personally. And you're forming a bond.
I think that we made a point of going down to Menard. And listen, for listeners who don't know, Chicago's up here. Menard is like 6.5 hours south. I mean, you're on the same latitude as Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
So you're on the Mississippi River. They're serving grits. This is a big commitment to go down there and to go back. Mm-hmm. And we did that many times. And, and prisoners like visits. We know that. And we know also that when you're trying to get something done with a client, it's so much better face to face, and you can't trust the phones to be confidential. So there's a good reason to go down and meet with your client. So we made a point of going down there. And, when you have a client who has a date with death, you're a little bit more sensitive to his needs and his wants. And he wanted us to come down and talk to him. So we did. And we did form a relationship. And I would say that I probably formed a closer relationship with him for an interesting reason. Gacy really liked women, and he preferred women. He preferred to talk to women. He loved his mother. He had two sisters whom he loved greatly. He got along with me. He was gentler with me. He wasn't as oppositional. He liked to talk about cooking and gardening and girl stuff. Mm-hmm. And he just had a whole different mentality with me. And so I was able to, and I also understood how he was manipulative. And I understood, having read about narcissists and people with antisocial behavior, how everyone's a pawn in their lives. So I knew what he was trying to do with me when he was trying to get information from me and then use it against me and do all that, because I've seen that before. So I kind of could do the end run. I would say, "Oh, John, that's a good idea. I'm glad you came up with it." He'd nod and agree with me. So so I was able to be effective with him in a way that I think the male attorneys just weren't.
Which is incredibly interesting. And that comes through in the book. It really does come through in the book that you form that instant bond with him. You're in with him so much so that you're almost playing him a little bit, Karen, like a puppet. You're kind of, you're in there, you've got the strings, and you're moving him when you need to move him. He is a little bit apprehensive at first, but and he does put up a fight at times when he doesn't want to be moved, but you manage to move him in the direction you need to move him. Somewhat, like I said, albeit a little bit, stubbornly when he doesn't want to be moved, but you do move him when you need to move him in the direction you need to move him.
One of the things when you're a lawyer is you have to have this bond with your client. And I represented people who are very difficult to deal with, who aren't very particularly polite to me or, actually rude to me, aggressive with me. So it's really part of my job to tone that down, to try to find some commonality.
Yeah.
Or if someone's afraid, intimidated by a lawyer, that happens a lot when someone hasn't dealt with lawyers and they feel like you're talking above them or whatever. So, I always, start my meetings with my clients, whether it was on Zoom back then, it was in person, or on the phone, where I would just, hey, where are you from? And like, where'd you go to high school? And, oh yeah, I used to play sports there. And, so we have a bond now. Now I know where you're from. I know who you are. You know who I am. I'm vulnerable. You're vulnerable. And I think that always helps the relationship. And is that manipulative? Maybe not, but with Gacy, it was either manipulate a little bit or be manipulated. So I knew that I had to be a little bit stronger with him because of his personality disorders.
I think that's what I was trying to get at, is I think you had to be manipulative with him because otherwise you get manipulated. It's kind of a dog-eat-dog thing here, Karen, where,
yes,
I mean, you can't afford to be the nice guy here, because if you are, I mean, you're going to get swallowed up. That's just all there is to it, right?
And the manipulation was for his benefit. Yes, it wasn't like I was manipulating him out of, an extra month of life or money or anything. I mean, I knew what was in his best interest. He needed to sign the documents that we were filing, and he needed to prove them, and he needed to do it now. Yes. And if he was going to delay and do his Gacy thing, that this wasn't going to be in his best interest. So I obviously was doing things to help him.
Yeah, and it wasn't like you're getting paid either. You're not getting any money out of the deal. So
no, I didn't.
Yeah.
That was not a factor.
Right. Money wasn't a factor either. So what's interesting, the other interesting thing about this too, this entire case, is that as you're going forward in the case, you would think that with representing Gacy would come, at least in this day and age, Karen, comes a lot of fame. You would think, all these media outlets would be grabbing you. In this day and age, they'd be grabbing you, and Karen would be on Fox and CNN, and you would have superstardom. You weren't getting superstardom as you were representing Gacy, were you?
Well, I was getting a lot of media attention, but I'm not sure it was really good media attention,
right.
But certainly the news outlets wanted to talk to somebody on the Gacy team because this was the hot subject. This was before, a lot of the death penalty stuff was going on. There was a moratorium nationally for a long time. And so this was a high profile case. I mean, really before OJ, it was really, there were international inquiries into what was going on. So I did take my lessons on how to speak in radio, and how to speak in television, and how to present yourself and do all that, because I knew that if I wanted to get my message across, I couldn't be distracting and I couldn't be made fun of. I did not want to be, ridiculed any more than I already was. But again, what's interesting about this whole Gacy thing is, and I'm skipping ahead just a little bit, like within 30 days after Gacy was executed, O.J. Simpson took his drive in the Broncos. So then I did get the attention from the media who said, oh, I remember Karen. She's a lawyer. She's got a license in California and she did a good job with Gacy. Hey, can you come on and deal with this trial of the century? So I then kind of embarked on my career as a legal analyst and radio show host.
There you go. Tell you what, let's take our break here. When we come back, who exactly was John Wayne Gacy, and how was he different in his relations to Karen and Greg than he was to the rest of the world? Did Karen see a different side than maybe even John Wayne Gacy showed his family? We'll talk about that when we come back, because after reading the book, I do have to ask you a question here, Karen, and that is, did you see a different side of John Wayne Gacy than he even showed his own family? And maybe the entire world? I read something interesting online after I had read the book, and I want to bring it up with you here in this next segment. And maybe you got a different side of John Wayne Gacy than the rest of the world. We'll talk about that when we come back. We'll also talk about the death penalty. Is the death penalty outdated? Is this something that maybe we should just walk on by? Maybe we shouldn't even address the death penalty anymore. Maybe permanent life in prison is the way to go. We'll talk about this with Karen Conti, our guest, when we come back. The name of the book is Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, defending America's most evil serial killer on death row. We have a link to it in the description of this program. Go on and get it while we're in the break. When we come back, more with Karen Conti, and we'll talk more about John Wayne Gacy when we come back right here on the Best in True Crime Podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the Best in True Crime Podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Our guest is defense attorney and author Karen Conti. She is here with her new book, Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, defending America's most evil serial killer on death row. Karen, before the break, we were talking about what kind of person John Wayne Gacy really is. It's hard to take someone who is a psychopath, someone who does have, we'll just say, personality deficiencies. That's probably the nicest way to put it. And say, well, do we truly know who that person was? And did we really see that person for who they were? It could be argued that he showed you a side of himself, probably the best side of himself when you came to see him, because obviously he needed something from you. And he needed the best of your abilities for whatever reason he needed at the time. I think there's a quote from his nephew in the book, which is kind of chilling. And I don't know if you know the quote I'm talking about, where you ask him, if John Wayne Gacy were exposed to the internet, do you think that there wouldn't have been any killings, that he wouldn't have killed 33 people and put them in his crawl space, that he would have just been able to experience and been a homosexual and not have killed anybody and have not experienced that rageful, murderous side of him? Do you remember what his nephew said?
He said words to the effect, Karen, if there were an internet when John was doing his killing, there'd be a lot more of them.
Oh, that's just chilling. To think that the internet would have proliferated John Wayne Gacy and not helped him is chilling. There's one of the articles I was reading after I read your book, Karen, there is a quote from Cook County Assistant State Attorney Lawrence Finder. He told Mark of a Killer, I think, on Oxygen. He said, Gacy was arrogant. He could see the policeman sitting in front of the house and he'd invite him in to use the restroom. That arrogance would eventually lead to Gacy's downfall after one officer noticed the smell of decomposition while he was in the contractor's bathroom. Which to me says a whole different side of his personality. It's just, come on. I got you right where I want you. I'm flaunting what I did. I know who I am. I have this side of me and I'm proud of it, which is absolutely chilling, which is completely different than the side that he showed you. Well,
he did show me that side a little bit, if you read between the lines.
Sure.
I think a bunch of things are working here. So first of all, Gacy, not unlike some people I know in politics and law, he's always the smartest guy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys, right? Always the smartest person in the room. And guess what? He's not always, right? And so, but Gacy was also kind of in denial as to who he was. So I could almost see him say, hey, come on in here. You're not going to find anything, even though there's bodies under this house. And there's one other thing here, too, is that I think Gacy wanted to get caught. I think that Gacy had ramped it up, as many serial killers do. They need more and more, more frequent killings, more disgusting killings, and to satisfy that urge. And I think he was ramping up to the point where he was drinking huge amounts of alcohol, taking all these drugs, working all day, not sleeping at night. And it was just affecting him in a way that was impossible for him to live his life. Not that he was remorseful. I'm not saying that.
Right.
Not to say that he wouldn't have continued to do that, but I think that he wanted it to be over. I do. I really do think he wanted it to be over. And maybe this was his way of inviting the police in to put this to bed.
I don't want to spoil too much about the book here, Karen, but I do want to ask you this. You were closest to him. It's obvious. Out of the characters that are in this book, you're the one who got through to him. Why then did he have to put on his best face with you? Why, when you tried to prod him as to, when you would say to him, hey, JW, come on, tell me a little bit about the killings. Tell me a little bit about what happened. How come he couldn't just come out and tell you?
Yeah, I had no reason to ask that other than curiosity, because our appeals really didn't deal with the guilt innocence. It's hard to understand that, but we were just attacking the method of execution and the fact of executing. But I was just curious. I was hoping to maybe he could unburden himself. Yeah. Maybe he would tell me the name of a victim, because there were several that were unidentified. And if I could help a victim's family, maybe I could, bring some comfort to them, or maybe, somehow stay the execution. I don't know what I was thinking, but Gacy had confessed to the crimes when he was arrested, almost like by rote. He had an almost photographic memory about these young men, where he picked them up. A lot of them, he knew their names. He knew exactly where they were buried in the crawl space. He drew a map for the police. But then after the trial, he just started denying that he did any of these cases, any of these killings. So then by the time I got to him, he was institutionalized, and he had been saying all this BS all along. No, the only thing I'm guilty of is running a cemetery without a license, which was his big joke. And, he wouldn't talk to me about it. He'd say things once in a while when I prod him, but that would lead me to believe things were going on that maybe the public didn't know. And I share a lot of that in my book, but I don't have any hard facts to prove some of it. But yeah, Gacy was not forthcoming with those details.
One of the things you mentioned in this book, which absolutely blows my mind, and you put examples in there, is that he did have a very ironic, almost morbid sense of humor. I know you got to have gallows humor, and there's of course gallows humor on death row. Tell me how you deal with gallows humor. I mean, I suppose you have to as a lawyer that's dealing with having to go to Menard and dealing with different prisoners and whatnot, but and you've got to get used to it dealing with Gacy. But did you actually start genuinely chuckling at some of Gacy's humor?
Well, this is hard to talk about because, I don't want anyone to think that I thought that Gacy, what he did was funny.
Sure, right.
It was not funny.
We can separate his humor from what he did, I think.
I'm writing a book about my relationship with him and my observations of what it was to deal with him, and to maybe even speculate as to why he got away with it for so long, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about his sense of humor. Sure. I grew up in a family, my father was a stand-up comic, so that's the beginning of it. So I'm a serious lawyer who has a serious sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And I saw that Gacy used humor. He told jokes. He was a quip one-liner. He had self-effacing, funny, dark jokes about himself. And I'm telling you, he was funny. And I do believe that was one of the reasons that people were attracted to him and that he got away with it, because if you realize, people who are funny, you want to be around them. They're jovial, they're funny, that's an attractive quality. Right. And I think it puts their guards down, and I think it makes them engaging. And Gacy did that with me, and I did it back to him. And that was actually one of our little bonding tools when I would need to calm him down or get some cooperation. I'd say, John, got a joke for me today? And I tell him one, and he'd tell me one. Not always, usually not, like a little blue. Okay. So a little rough around the edges there, but I don't think that there was anything odd about it. And he was funny. I mean, so like for an example, I tell this in my book, Tim, I said, hey, JW, I was watching Phil Donahue, which is for your younger listeners, probably one of the first, talk shows, afternoon talk shows. And I said, and I heard this woman say like, oh, I'm going to marry John Gacy. I've been pen pal with him for years. I said, come on, what's wrong? JW playing for both teams? Like, what's the story? And he said, Oh, that's Sue Terry. He goes, she's got 3 kids and they're all in the penitentiary. Like, I'm going to marry into a family like that. So come on, that's funny, right? And dark.
Yeah.
But that's the type of thing that Gacy was good for.
Yeah. Yeah. The one I really liked is the fresh strawberries, where you talked about how, if for your last meal, if you really wanted to put things off a little bit, just tell the state of Illinois you want fresh strawberries for your last meal. In order to get them, they'd have to go to California to get them because they're out of season in Illinois. That would prolong things a little bit. And of course, what did he do? He asked for fresh strawberries.
He sure did.
So, he had a good memory as well. Things like that. And I think we all can appreciate good gallows humor. That's the thing. And we have to remember that even though there are different aspects to everybody's personality, you can be the most evil person in the world and still have some gallows humor in there. And you can still be, you can still have a sense of humor. Everybody has some sense of humor.
This is hard to talk about because you think that the Gacys of the world are just walk around evil all day long doing evil things, right? Yeah. Just evil this, evil that. No, just narcissists that aren't violent, they do good things sometimes. They're good at their jobs. They're nice to their family, whatever. Gacy was an upstanding citizen. He worked very hard. He made what would be $400,000 in today's dollars. He volunteered at his church. He mowed the lawns for his neighbors. He threw parties everywhere. He, was devout Catholic. He did all these things that were moral and upstanding and helpful and kind and generous. And then he would go out and do these horrific things. Yeah. So there was a compartmentalization of him. And so because I never saw and experienced him in that rage, that sexual frenzy, rage, murderous, mode, I didn't see that. So I just saw him acting like a normal human being. So that's really confusing. It's very confusing to deal with somebody because if he's faking being a good person, then who am I really dealing with at any given time?
Right.
So I think very confusing.
I think there are some confusing things in the book. I think, the people that show up, at the execution to say goodbye to him, that seem very loving towards him. You speak of good things. I want to talk about one of the good things that he did for you, the birthday present. He does paintings for you, which one of the things I wanted to stress to you here, Karen, which is unusual, and I know you know this, those paintings he did for you in today's market are worth millions of dollars.
Oh, I don't think so. Do you?
Yes.
Oh, I hope not. I hope not.
You don't know this, but they are. That's what's funny. There are people out there that would pay an arm and a leg for Gacy paintings. They
are hideous. They are the worst of the worst. They are really bad.
Let's explain to the people listening here, and I know there are people who are listening here that know this, but John Wayne Gacy paintings are worth big time money out there. But as a gift to you for your birthday, he painted 3 paintings, correct?
Yes, he gifted me, I think, 2 on my birthday, and then later he gave me another one. But he did these paintings that were all very similar. Like he would line up the easels in his little cell, and he would do the same thing over and over, and he would sell them. One was a clown, Pogo the Clown. You've probably seen it on the internet. He's in a clown outfit waving with a little balloon and funny hat on, the whole story. And then the other one that he gave me was the Skull Clown, which was a skull with a clown hat on it. Again, totally hideous, really creepy.
It's disturbing,
and very disturbing. And then the one that he made for me was an original. It was called Seascape or something, and it was like a sort of a sci-fi landscape. Really ugly, horrible. Yeah.
You didn't like it, huh?
Stick with house painting, John.
Oh no!
Stick with house painting. Just no.
Well, and we were talking, we also do a paranormal show here with Darkness Radio. You're telling me something unusual about the paintings. Now, with these paintings, and you admit in the book, you never did display the paintings in your house, even though Gacy had asked you, where did you have a special place in your house where you put the paintings? What did you tell John when he asked you?
You know what? I have good taste. I'm not putting those on my wall. I also am a little creeped out by them. But I kind of avoided the answer because I didn't want to hurt his feelings to the extent he had any.
Yeah.
So I sort of said, I thanked him profusely. I said, that was very kind of you. And I promptly brought them down to my house and put them in the basement.
Okay. Which I could see that. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you stored them in the basement, but something had happened in that basement, didn't it?
Well, I lived in a house that was old. It was built in 1919, I believe. And I stored a bunch of things down there, but I never really went down there. So when I sold the house eventually, many years later, I went to look and there was a crack in the foundation that water had seeped in and really ruined pretty much everything I had down there. And except where the paintings were face down, there was like a footprint, of just where those paintings were. And there was no water anywhere near them.
And they were protected.
I don't know. It was weird.
Spirit of Gacy is keeping his paintings dry so you can hang them on the wall, Karen. See?
Can't make me do that from the grave. No.
Speaking of from the grave, I think this is probably a good place to bring this up. You mention it in just a blurb in the book, but again, I mentioned that we're also a paranormal show, so I want to bring this up. In the book, you mentioned that there's a television ghost hunter that tried to purchase Gacy's brain after he had been executed. I don't want to, we're going to step ahead and then come back here. That there was a television ghost hunter that tried to purchase Gacy's brain from a psychologist who had, I don't know how a psychologist gets a hold of Gacy's brain after an autopsy, but it happened. Can you explain? Can we get into this a little bit? How does this psychologist get a hold of his brain, first of all?
So she was a psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist, I'm sorry.
And she had offered the family to look at the brain after the execution to see if there was anything damaged in his brain, so that maybe there could be some explanation. He had had 2 traumatic brain injuries when he was young that hospitalized him, and that has been known to cause people to change their empathy factor or their impulse control issues. So she took the brain and she said there was nothing wrong with it. It was completely normal. But the family just never got it back and never really thought about it. And so flash ahead, like all these years, it's 28 years or 29 years, we hear that she's getting ready to sell this brain to the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, place that I've been actually, that has Gacy memorabilia along with Kevorkian's killing machine and all kinds of interesting artifacts.
Sure.
And so the sister was outraged. She's like, you can't, that's just awful. So she tried to get it back, and then she hired me. I did it for nothing, obviously. And I sent a bunch of emails, and finally I sent a real stern legal letter saying, how dare you? And so the brain arrived in my office in a box that said, do not tilt this end up. And I walked into my office and my entire staff was standing around it, like backing up like this. And so that was the only victory I really got for Gacy, actually. Got his brain back.
From the same article, I want to read you something, Karen. And I want to see if this wouldn't have changed Gacy's sister's mind. The reason, now I remember earlier I had told you that Gacy's stepdaughter sold that stuff to Zach Baggins, right? And this is a direct quote from Zach. And I found it interesting. And this kind of changed my mind. Now, in the book, you remember different times Gacy would say that things would live on long after him. He would talk about your career. Your career was going to go on long after him, and you were going to have a heck of a career based on what he had, you representing him, and your career was going to go gangbusters, right? And you talk about how the evil that men do go on long after they die, right? Things that go on long after. And you kind of talked about how he had a little bit of a vanity streak, how, he would, the whole wanting to be famous type thing, right? I want you to hear about this quote about the reason why, and I'm trying to find this quote here, the reason why Zach decided to purchase this stuff and put it in the museum. I found it interesting. Okay, so it says here that Zach said he told TMZ he was intrigued by the letters because they showed a different, more loving side to the killer who was executed in 1994. That he took and he bought those letters and he bought the stuff from the stepdaughter and put it in the museum because he wanted to see the loving side of Gacy and he wanted that to be on display. Not necessarily that he wanted to display the evil side of Gacy. It makes me question why he wanted the brain then. With that in mind, I wonder if Zach would have had the chance to sit down with Gacy's sister and talk to her about why he wanted that brain. If he would have given her the money directly, could there have been another deal?
Gacy's sister she just died a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah. And we had been, I wouldn't say close friends, but close acquaintances for 30 years. And we've always checked in with each other. And, I will say this, when you are a family member of a John Gacy, you change your name, you move out of town, your kids change their names, everyone runs from it. Karen, Gacy's sister, also a Karen, was horrified that her brother was what he was. She had no clue. She was the most shocked. She knew him as a generous guy, a normal guy. She knew that there was problems with the dad's relationship, but she said it wasn't that bad where he turned into a serial killer. She felt enormous guilt from the victims' families. Like, could there have been something I should have seen or done or gotten him help? And it ate at her for years and years. And when he was executed, she grieved. I mean, the government killed her brother and she couldn't stand out there and show her grief because, that everyone would have said, oh, she's Gacy's family. Who cares? Right. Mm-hmm. She doesn't get to grieve like the victims' families. So she had really tortured the last 30 years or more, actually 45 years. So my guess is that she wouldn't have dealt with that. She wouldn't have done it for all the money in the world.
Okay.
She's not that kind of person. I think she would have recognized. And listen, Zach Bagans has a cool museum. It's creepy, but that's what people do in true crime. And there's some creepy things there that aren't showing the loving side of a serial killer. There's stuff there that's just for the creep factor.
That's true.
And
true.
I get it. And yeah. I don't disparage him for that. I think, he's found himself a wonderful niche. Good for you. You entertain people. And you do explain some things. There's some things in that museum that are educational. So, but I don't think his sister would have done that deal.
Okay, so if his sister wouldn't have done the deal, let me throw another angle at you and then we'll drop it altogether here, Karen. Do you think Gacy would have got off on the creep factor of having his brain in Zach's museum?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just a simple question of, do you think he would have loved the notoriety of being there?
And, if I knew that was going to be an option before he died and I said, JW, Zach Bagans wants your brain after you're dead, he'd say, fine. How much? $1 million. He would probably say, ask for 1.5. he would be negotiating, and he would find a real comfort knowing that he's so famous that someone's paying that much money for a body part. That's kind of how he was wired. So
there you go. Okay, there you go. I guess that's the question I have as far as that goes. Let's talk a little bit about, as we talk about this now, let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about the death penalty here a little bit. And then we'll talk about a little bit about the final days there and your feeling and your husband's feeling for John as he went. The death penalty as it stands right now, Karen, is controversial both on a state level and on a federal level. You mentioned in the book that our current president, Joe Biden, is definitely against it. It's not something that you'll ever see roll out on a federal level, at least as long as he's president, which is, I don't want to say interesting because I think that's a given. Is it a given on a federal level that we won't see it? Or do you think there would be a president that would roll it out?
There's no president who was against the death penalty, even Bill Clinton. And I don't know that Barack Obama used it a lot, but he did. And actually, Joe Biden kind of went back on what he said, and he is charging, he meaning the federal government is charging the kid in, I think it's Buffalo, New York, who was guilty of that racist shooting in the grocery store. He was prosecuted on a state level, and the federal government brought terrorism charges against him and are seeking the death penalty last I looked.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it is falling out of favor. And I think that's kind of the interesting part over the years that I've been talking about Gacy, 30 years. It's gone from being at a real high of public opinion that the vast majority, 80 to 85% of people were in favor of the death penalty for certain crimes. And now we're seeing a walking back of that in the last, say, 10 years.
What is it? Is it the psychology of, if it's unseen, I can deal with it. If I had to pull the trigger myself, I couldn't do it? Is it that keeps people able to root for the death penalty?
We've always had it. So people say, why abolish it? And I say the opposite. I say, why use it? If it doesn't deter, it's too expensive. We get it wrong all the time. I can make all my arguments. We all have our opinions, and I'm not here to change anyone's mind.
Sure.
But I think that the less we use it, the less the prosecutors are seeking it. And now you're seeing, there was one of the big school shooting cases where the jury sat and watched the horrendous evidence of the havoc and murder that this kid, leveled on this school, and they didn't give him the death penalty. That was an option, and they just chose not to. So I think we're seeing it not being in favor. And I think there are plenty of people out there who think that putting someone in prison for 50 years, if you're a school shooter, which might be how long you spend, living in a cell the size of half a parking space, that might be harder than a lethal injection shot in the arm. And I don't know that I believe that, but I think a lot of people do believe that.
And is there, I have to ask myself the question. I'll ask you the question as well, Karen. Is there such a thing as rehabilitation when someone who's so young, like let's take the example of a school shooter. If a school shooter shoots someone at the age of 16, you put them in jail for 50 years. When they come out at the age of 66 and they've spent their entire life in that space, it's less than a parking space. Is there the opportunity to rehabilitate? You're different at 66 than you were at 16. You've spent your entire life behind bars. You obviously are a different person, but are you a different person that's better for society?
Yeah, that's just on a case-by-case basis. Sure. Do I think people can be rehabilitated? Absolutely. Gacy? No, never. Not in anybody's world. But, there was a guy who was that I talk about in my book, Ronaldo Hudson, I'll say his name. Mm-hmm. He committed a brutal murder of an elderly carpenter, I believe, and he just behaved horribly in prison, got the death sentence, and he just became one of the most rehabilitated prisoners ever. He got degrees, he taught in the ministry, he did all these things. And finally, when his time came because his death sentence was commuted by our governor, along with all the other people on death row, no one objected to him getting parole and getting out. So the victims' families, the prosecutors, they all held him up to be one of the success stories. And I know him now, and he works for an organization that helps people get out of prison and be productive. And he's a good guy, and he's got a family, and he's rehabilitated. Now, how do you know who's going to be that person and who's going to be the person who comes out and does it again? I think that's hard to predict.
It is hard to predict. It's hard to say one way or another what path one person's going to take or another. You could say, well, and if someone does reoffend and it does end up being deadly, you can't point at that one person and say, well, the entire bunch is going to reoffend. You can't blame one bad apple spoils a whole bunch, girl. You know the song. But, you can't say that one reoffender is going to ruin it for everybody else. I think you have to have faith in this case. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think you have to understand what you're dealing with. And, Gacy was arrested and convicted of molesting a boy in Iowa before he started his killing spree in Chicago. And the psychiatrist there who examined him extensively for 10 days said, this is a man who's not going to stop doing this, and he's going to run afoul words to that effect, of the criminal justice system for the rest of his life. Well, guess what? That was probably a very good call, doctor. So, there's certain people who aren't going to change. The compulsion is so strong to do this kind of thing. You can't change that. They need to be locked up. There's just no question.
So with that said, is there a certain psychological type or criminal type that we can just automatically say these are going to be habitual reoffenders and they do need life in prison, and we can't put them back out on the street? They're going to be habitual reoffenders.
I mean, I think serial killers, people who prey and on people and stalk them and abduct them and torture them and bury them. Yeah, they're not going to stop. I think you can put those people in a category that we need to lock them up from society. And, like I said, I think Gacy understood that he was better off in prison because even he didn't want to continue to do that. Not, again, because he had some qualms about it or remorse. It was just too much for him. And he knew that it just took over his life.
So you got the idea from dealing with him that he would have been okay with the rest of his life being at Menard? That
he said that.
Yeah.
He told me that.
He would have been all right. That he would have.
He was a person, and listen, I dealt with people in prison, for years, and they become institutionalized. They become very, their world gets small. And you say to yourself when you come in there, I could never live like this. But they do. They learn to adapt. They look forward to that 1 hour outside. They look forward to their 3 meals a day. They look forward to, their television show or whatever they have, and their visitors and their mail. And Gacy had a life there, I mean, it was such as it was, but I mean, he was productive. I know he did some work in the prison and helped paint things, and then they didn't allow him to do that. But I mean, he had regular correspondence with people and visitors, and he had friends on death row, if you can call those people friends. And, it was a life that he lived.
I want to play a little what if with you here, Karen, as we start to wind down here. Let's say it would have been successful. Let's say that one of those appeals would have went through and they would have said, we're changing this from the death penalty to life in prison without parole. Could you have, because as we read the book, we get that there are certain stresses there, although you did have a friendship there with John Wayne Gacy, as tentative as it was. Could you have handled the stress of the phone calls and the visits and knowing that this serial killer was in your life? He wasn't going away. Do you think that you could have handled John Wayne Gacy for the rest of his natural life at Menard?
Oh, the Gacy that won't go away. Well, I will tell you this. I engaged with him, and friendship is probably a loose term. It was more like a bond, a relationship. Friendship is hard when it's a shell of a person, like an antisocial personality. But I certainly wouldn't have allowed him into my life on an ongoing basis. I probably would have corresponded him with once a year. How are you doing? I'm glad I saved your life. I hope you're well. And that's about it, because that is too much. And he was very invasive, and he was manipulative and stressful to be around. He would suck the energy right out of you. And so I would not have allowed that to continue.
That's interesting. I don't think that you can work as closely as you and your husband did and try to separate from that type of personality. I don't think they would let you. Do you think it would be easy to do?
Well, I think the reason that I'm right about this is that we would have lost our ability to do something for him. And Gacy was always scoping out who's going to be my next pawn to help me do what I need to do. And I think that once we were of no use to him, he would have said his thank yous in a very polite way, probably didn't mean much of it, and he would have moved on to somebody else who we could control.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see that. Let's talk about the last bit of your dealings with him. I don't want to spoil the end of the book by any means, but I do want to talk about your last dealing, a little bit of your last dealing with, not the very last, but your little bit of the last dealings with him. As things are winding down, he seemed kind of disinterested or disengaged. want to ask you this last question here. Do you feel like there was denial all the way up until the end? Or do you feel like he was just resolved to the fact that it was going to end either way? So he might as well just get right with whatever it was that was going to happen, and he was going to exit this earth.
I think it was mostly denial that, he was flown into the place where they were going to execute him. He was allowed to have friends and family there, and he had his last meal there, and he was surrounded by people he hadn't seen or dealt with in a long time. So he was very joyful in that he was getting all this attention and that he was allowed to, socialize, and something he hadn't done in 14 years. So, but I also think he was in denial. I had to ask him questions to make sure he was in his right mind, because if he wasn't in his right mind, we could delay the execution. Mm-hmm. And he just basically shooed me off and said, of course I'm in, And I was the one who had to give him news about a final appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court that was denied. And I had to break that to him, and I was worried he was going to be upset, and he really wasn't. So I think he was really good at denial and compartmentalizing his feelings to the extent he had them. So I don't know that he was thinking about the lethal injection. I think he was just thinking in the moment that he was doing his thing. And I don't know how you can't think about what's going to happen momentarily. But he wasn't showing it. He wasn't showing his fear at all.
And finally, can we talk about the lethal injection for a moment?
Sure.
About what exactly happened with it, because it is a little alarming. You talk in the book about how the system that was sold to the state of Illinois was a faulty system. Can you explain that a little bit?
The guy who invented it was a Nazi revisionist. He believes the Holocaust didn't happen, and he went to Nazi Germany and studied the way that Nazis killed Jews. So that's how he designed his little equipment. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a doctor. He was just kind of a charlatan. And this machine had failed before, and it had failed in other states. It had failed in one execution in Illinois prior to this time. And we predicted that it was going to fail with Gacy, and it did. The people who give the execution, the lethal injection, are not doctors. Doctors cannot perform lethal injection. That's against their oath. So you have prison people who don't know how to inject anything, and they're injecting people who have veins that are contracted and constricted, I should say. And so, it failed. And Gacy, I think it took him somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes to kill him, during which time he probably was suffocated to death, even though he wasn't flailing around because of the paralytic chemical that they used. And most people say, I don't care, but we should care, because if you're going to kill someone in this world, we should do it as painless and quick as possible.
Yeah, I don't know that we sign up to kill somebody with the death penalty as painful as possible. I mean, even in olden times, you were hung by the neck and had a broken neck, or you were shot with a bullet, where it was as quick as you could do it.
Guillotine is the best,
yes,
actually. Guillotine is real fast, and it's less painful than almost anything, maybe except the firing squad. Yeah. But nobody wants to see heads roll, as they say. So
that's right.
I think that's not palatable to people. And I think if we saw that and witnessed that, we probably would do away with the death penalty sooner rather than later.
I do want to talk about one other thing before I let you go here, Karen, and that's this. You do paint a picture at the end of the book that reminds me a lot of some of the older scenes when people would have picnics outside of executions. We talk about, when they would have hangings and families would get together and they would sit outside the gallows and they would wait for the accused to be hung. The picture you painted of the Gacy execution reminded me a lot of those stories. And it was disturbing. I mean, you talk about one particular sign having to do with you that was disturbing. And to me, I don't ever, maybe it's just my moral set. I don't ever celebrate anybody getting killed. To me, that's not a thing to celebrate. I don't care what you've done. I'm never going to celebrate anybody's death. That's not something to be celebrating. But I guess I don't get the mindset. I don't get the mindset of coming out to an execution and throwing a party.
Yeah, it was disturbing because it was a school night and it was late. It was midnight, when he was getting executed. And there were hundreds of people lined up. Some of them were in clown costumes and makeup. They had beer in their back of their pickup trucks. Kids were there, kids who probably had no idea who he was and certainly weren't alive when Gacy was convicted. And they were celebrating and they had signs, kill the clown and all of this. And, to me, if you're going to use the lethal injection, if you're going to execute people because you've done something so wrong that the government does a calculated killing of you, then this should be solemn. This should be honoring the victims. This should be in a way that is not a circus and people drinking and celebrating. There's nothing to celebrate here. The Gacy being evil is not to be celebrated. Whatever happened to him when he was young that messed him up for life, that caused him to take 33 lives, that should not be celebrated. And it just really seemed wrong. And I wondered to myself, is this what we are now as a country, that we have to have a party to celebrate someone's death? I don't know.
Right. And I'm with you there. If the victims' families want to be there, that's fine. Because they're the ones who deserve to see justice done.
However that looks to them.
Right, right.
If it makes sense for them to be there and watch it, good. I hope they get some comfort from that. Yeah. But these kind of people who are not involved in it, I'm not sure I understood the whole thing.
Right. And to me, I guess I go one step further and go, what business is it of theirs? They weren't involved. Sure, you might have felt fear when the news was saying who this guy was and when he was out on the loose, but he never came to your town. He never entered your house. He never killed anybody you knew. So why are you out celebrating his death? I don't get the mindset.
Yeah, I think I would have better things to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a school night. I mean, come on,
Yeah, right.
So I guess I don't know. There's certain human behaviors that will always confound me, Karen. I maybe I'm different. I don't know. I just don't. I don't get the mob mentality, I guess. I'm not one of them.
I even understand how people are fascinated by serial killers. I do. I understand because I was one of them. We were talking about. I really was interested in all of these different people over the years who have killed and the different theories and all of that. And I like a good whodunit, fictional wise, But to celebrate a human being's death, that somehow crosses the line from creepy to something wrong with humanity a little bit.
Well, I find the psychology in the book, the relationship between your husband and you and John Wayne Gacy, and the relationship that Gacy had between, even prisoners in Menard and himself, and the relationships that are going on in this book is incredibly fascinating to me. I was riveted to this book based on all the relationships that are going on in this book. To me, that's riveting. And maybe I'm a fan of the way people interact with each other and the different sides that you can see to different people. To me, I know that people are not one-dimensional. I know that they don't have just that one side to them. Sure, the things that Gacy did were abhorrent. They were downright despicable. But to see that there's this whole other side is just mind-blowing. And you see that, to see the things that, to see him he's this whirling dervish that just he's a spinning top that goes from one side of his personality to another, and he's conducting his business is fascinating to watch. That's the only way I can put it. It's fascinating to watch, and the fact that you chronicled this and put this in a book, I think is just a service that you've done to mankind. And at the same time, telling your own story is just something remarkable that you've done for humanity. That's all. That's the only thing I can say.
That's very kind of you. And I know that Gacy's the draw for the book. I want everyone to go out and read it. But I I also think that you'll get other things out of it. I think
Yes.
there's some educational things in there. I think there's some entertainment in there.
Yes.
And I also think there's some empowerment in there, because it's also about, taking on a real tough challenge in your life. We have all had them, whether it's a, sickness in the family or something that goes wrong, but to kind of do what you need to do in life and then come out on the other end more resilient and more confident and more prepared for what will definitely happen to you, which is bad things will happen to you in your life. There's no question about that. It's just, how you deal with them and how you use them moving forward.
Well, I also, before we leave here today, I also want to tip my cap to you, because there's also a very, very uplifting story when it comes to you in here as well. And there's some very uplifting stories here. You've faced a lot of adversity here, Karen, in your career. I encourage people to read the chapter when it comes to you having to go face to face with Sandra Day O'Connor. That story alone is amazing. When you're there at the Supreme Court, and kind of chilling. I'll let people read that for themselves. The fact that you can come so far yet still look down upon people of your own gender is a little dismaying, I guess is a good way to put it, and disappointing. That was what I got from that. But I'm glad you did have a positive experience later down the road with her. Is that good to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you've put things together in such a great way in your career, that you've accomplished so much against such adversity. You've come so far. Your story is so uplifting. And man, you talk about someone who's just knocked it out of the park from in your entire career. This story is just so much more than John Wayne Gacy. And if I haven't sold that, I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
Thank you. And I've heard that before, and that's exactly what I hope to do. Actually, I just vomited on the page, right? And looking back 30 years now, I can put all these things in perspective with a little wisdom, a little wit, and so I'm hoping that that's the upshot of the book. I really hope so. I
mean, we didn't even really scratch the surface about we talked a little bit about your being on TV. We haven't talked even about you being on WGN and radio and different media outlets that you've worked for, teaching, being a professor. You've had quite a few accomplishments and now author. You've really knocked it out of the park in every medium you've been in every outlet you've been in. So this isn't just about John Wayne Gacy. This book isn't just about John Wayne Gacy. It really is. It's a document of your accomplishments as well. But John Wayne Gacy in here, this is kind of a entry into the adversity that you've had to face. And really, John Wayne Gacy is a big hurdle to get over when you start that entry into that world. So, yeah, it's a fascinating book, Karen. It really is. Fascinating book.
Thank you for having me on and having such nice things to say.
Well, I appreciate it, Karen. Again, folks, I encourage you to get this book. I was, again, blown away by it. Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, Defending America's Most Evil Serial Killer on Death Row. We have a link to it in the description of this program. Karen, I want to thank you so much for being on True Crime Tuesday.
Nice meeting up with you, Tim.
Pleasure meeting you as well. Folks, we're going to lighten it up a little bit. It's time now for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals.
It's Crayon News story time.
What happened with this dude, Christ Bearer? I heard he cut his penis off and then jumped off a balcony.
Suspect pulls gun from butt, shoots twice at Denver police.
What is your emergency?
I need help.
And what's the problem?
I'm too high.
You're too high?
Yeah.
It's that time, the time you've all been looking forward to once again. It's time for Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals. And I have to report that after one of the most influential, one of the biggest shows of the year, much less one of the biggest shows ever for True Crime Tuesday, I couldn't get one of my co-hosts to show up for the show. So what I did is I reached out to an old friend. And I asked this old friend if he would come along for the fun and lighten things up for me after a deep, deep topic today having to do with John Wayne Gacy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring in a good friend of mine, a show host of his own, and one of the bigger guys in the paranormal, Scotty Roberts. Scotty, how you doing?
Hey, Timmy, I'm doing great. Good to hear from you and good to be here.
Good to have you here, my friend. We're gonna switch things up. We're gonna talk true crime between the two of us, and we're just gonna talk about silly people in the true crime world. We're gonna talk Florida Man. We're gonna talk. You know what? This is the 420 edition of Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals.
You know, if I'd have remembered that, I'd have prepared myself properly.
Yeah, I would have too. Yeah, if I would have.
So.
I think I forgot because of the residual from 420, to be honest with you. It was appropriate as there was plenty of activity going on 420, as you can imagine. And of course, that's the main theme. We have every week on Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals. See, I've got the residual going already. There's a not safe for work part of our show, which is towards the end. We do have some pretty, we'll just say risque stories towards the end, Scotty.
Sure. Can I say this now that I'm going to say it?
Sure.
Regarding residual, my wife used to partake of 420 on many, many days of the year.
Oh, okay.
Before I knew her 20 years ago.
Yep.
And now, after she had babies, she stopped smoking. She stopped drinking, which she still doesn't do, 15 years after our firstborn. But her brother smokes pot a lot. He used to live with us. She would go out to the garage when he smoked pot, and every now and then, I'd get invited to come out to the garage. To save the innocent here, I won't change the name.
Sure.
But I went out there, and my wife would come out, and she'd always be offered, "Hey, would you like to have some of this?"
Yeah.
"Oh, no. You just go, I'm satisfied with the secondhand smoke." And she would walk outside, and her whole family still does that. They come over for Thanksgiving or something. They all step outside. They pass the joint around, and she will go outside, not partake, but she'll stand there and go, and get the secondhand smoke and enjoy it.
I suppose maybe it's better than the smell of turkey.
I don't know.
Could be. Who knows?
Maybe
I don't know.
for her. She's gluten free, so maybe that has something to do with it.
That could be it. That could be it. It's better than imbibing on turkey and stuffing.
Right.
Who knows? Some people it's sweet potatoes and stuffing, and other people it's a little bit of Kush. Who knew?
My same brother-in-law, he will bring all kinds of, "Scotty, I made you some muffins." I'm like, "Dude, thank you." And he says, "I would recommend eating only a half of this one."
Oh.
And Rainey said, "No, give him like a quarter. He's a lightweight." I said, "Excuse me?" And so I ate the whole muffin. In spite of that comment, I will tell you what, I was stoned for 8 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And my small children, my younger children, 12 and 14 and 9, they laughed at Dad all night and took films of me trying to communicate. Because when you have a little too much of that stuff, you think you are illuminating the audience. You're talking to everybody. I'm talking about something let's talk about the eschatological Antiochus Epiphanes and make comparisons to the King of Tyre and all of and yet you listen back to it. And it's like flib jabbing in the Hasselbarf. And so anyway, I'm using up your time on that.
No. Before we launch into 420, let's tell people where people can listen to you.
Oh, sure. You can check me out I'm on Odyssey Radio. That's ODYSY Radio. That's audio only. 9 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Central Standard Time. And or you can just go over to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ Scotty Roberts. And if you forget all of that stuff, you can just go to my website. My website's my full name, ScottAlanRoberts.com. Alan is A-L-A-N because there's 300 ways to spell it. ScottAlanRoberts.com. And you can see links to all my stuff over there.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, here we go, Scotty. A woman tried to board a flight at Memphis airport with 56 pounds of marijuana. Probably 55 more than she needed.
This is just my carry-on.
Yeah. How big is that bag? 56 pounds of marijuana.
You know, you can only check. Your limit is 50 pounds when you check a bag.
Yeah.
And that's where you put all your heavy stuff.
Right.
I'm going to put it in there because I'm going to check it. That's a pretty big duffel bag.
How much clothes do you bring if you've got 56 pounds of marijuana? Is it 2 outfits? Is that what you're bringing?
I think if you have 56 pounds of marijuana, you're wearing the same clothes every day.
I think so. And they smell like weed. I'm just saying.
Yes. Yep.
Before a 21-year-old Memphis woman, this explains it, could board a United Airlines flight, Memphis International Airport Police found 56 pounds of marijuana in her luggage. The woman was charged with possession of a controlled substance with the intention to manufacture, deliver, or sell, Shelby County jail records showed. The charge is a felony offense that carries harsh penalties. The law office of Bernie McAvoy, an attorney in Nashville, Tennessee, said. The woman is now free after posting a $5,000 bond. That's it for 56 pounds of weed.
$5,000. You know, I have a friend who got pulled over and had 8 ounces in the state of Wisconsin, and he is going to court. He's in the process of going to court and all that. They impounded his car, and of course he had to unimpound it, and he got a big fine that he's now going to court for 8 ounces. I couldn't imagine 56 pounds.
Can you imagine what they would have done in Wisconsin for that?
Oh my God.
56 pounds?
Yeah, small town Wisconsin.
That's right. Now, this woman allowed the airport police to check her luggage and had her name tag on the bags, according to reports. There's more to this story. Memphis Airport Police caught the woman on Sunday after finding her luggage busted open on the United Airlines bag cart. The woman's name tag was attached to the bags, according to the TV station. After locating the woman's luggage, she gave airport police permission to search her bags. Once the drugs were found, she was subsequently arrested. USA Today contacted Memphis International Airport Police on Thursday and was told the department was working to provide a police report. Evidently, they're so stunned they can't type.
Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine. What was it like? If you find this pot, please don't smoke it. Return it to my address here on this tag. Yeah, if I'm going to be, was she detached from reality perhaps a little bit I can just, and the bag broke open. Why did it break open? She overstuffed it. She said, come on, we can fit one more 10 ouncer in there. Dime bag.
One more lid in there. Now, You may be wondering, Scotty, how much does 56 pounds of marijuana go for in the street? Believe it or not, right here in our area in St. Paul, a man was arrested for possessing 56 pounds of marijuana in May of 2013.
Oh, the same amount.
The same amount. Now, keep in mind, it was 11 years ago, but now retired Dakota County Attorney James Backstrom estimated the drugs had a street value of between, oh boy. You want to change professions? Are you ready for this?
Uh-oh.
$171,000 to $342,000. More recently, the Butler County Sheriff's Office seized 56 pounds of weed from a property in El Dorado Point at $180,000. But that's Kansas economy. So
there you go.
Yeah,
it's legal there, isn't it?
In Kansas?
I don't know.
I don't think it is in Kansas.
I have no idea.
No.
I know it's not here in Wisconsin yet. So
no, but it is here in Minnesota.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, just bring it on over here to Omeleteville and get yourself.
That's my brother-in-law lives in Minnesota, and he's growing his own. baking his own, making candy, little gummy bear things. And my kids always want them. No, that's for your dad. So to help me sleep,
Yeah.
Help me sleep.
Well, there's a new way. Speaking of, making candies and doing all this, there's a new way to use it now. And that is paying for your fast food.
Oh. Is this a case? A man offered to pay for his Big Mac with
Yes,
oh, my goodness. That's going to take 2 10-dime bags now, though. 10 years ago, it was only one.
That's right. We're going to Aurora, Colorado, Scotty, where a man is guilty of pulling a gun on a Burger King worker who refused to take drugs for payment.
Oh.
You know how
it's legal in Colorado.
That's right. You know how the commercial says that BK, you can have it your way?
Have it your Yes. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce.
Special
As a matter of fact, don't hold the lettuce.
Yeah.
The devil's lettuce.
That's right. Yeah. Well, evidently, this man had his feelings hurt. An Aurora man faces more than 400 years in prison after embarking on a late-night crime spree that began when he pulled a gun in a Burger King drive-thru after an employee refused payment in the form of drugs. Although this time it was possibly methamphetamine.
Oops.
Yeah. 40-year-old, this man was much too old to know better. 40-year-old Eugene Robertson would go on to fire multiple shots and narrowly avoid being shot himself during the series of bizarre confrontations that he instigated on the night of October 17th, 2022. Robertson was found guilty April 12th of 8 counts of attempted first-degree murder with extreme indifference, 4 counts of menacing using a firearm, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment, as well as single counts of illegally discharging a firearm, possession of methamphetamine, and harassment.
That reminds me of the old movies, the Edward G. Robinson, Jimmy Cagney movies. You're not taking me alive, copper. I always thought, why do you shoot back at the cops? You're going to get killed or seriously maimed, and then you're going to prison for many years. If I'm pulling off a crime and I've got a handgun in my hand and the cops say, drop your weapon, I'm like, here you go. It's on the concrete. Hands are laced behind my head. I don't understand these guys. Where do they think they're going to, is it just like, this is my Butch and Sundance moment. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. Or do they really think they're going to? It's like guys who run from the cops with their cars.
Yeah.
Where do they think they're going? Where are they going to end up?
Not very far.
No.
My nephew's dad, who's no longer with my sister. There's probably a reason for that. Was one of the first persons to experience the Dakota County Sheriff's new taser system. When he tried to run from the Dakota County Sheriff, they got him square in the thigh. So,
wow.
Yeah.
It's like, don't run. Just, take your chance. You may get only 322 years instead of 400 if you don't run.
Yeah.
But this guy who just got 400 years prison time, how do you serve that time? Is it just, do you just sit back? You're never going to get paroled.
1 year at a time.
Yeah, 1 year. 1 year at a time.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
That's his new book.
1 year at a time. The quote here from District Attorney John Kellner is, I can't imagine how traumatized these victims were not knowing whether the defendant would pull the trigger while pointing a gun at them. I commend the Aurora Police Department for quickly apprehending this dangerous defendant and ending his crime spree. Now, the employee of the Burger King near Alameda Avenue and Buckley Road told police he believed he was going to be shot and killed after turning down Robertson's offer of a baggie of drugs. Instead, Robertson drove away and pulled up to the 7-Eleven at the northwest corner of the intersection. DA's office spokesman Eric Ross wrote in an email that a baggie dropped by Robertson at the 7-Eleven and recovered by police, which contained about 5 grams of methamphetamine, resembled the baggie described by the drive-thru worker. A witness later told police that when Robertson entered the 7-Eleven, there seemed to be something off about him, and that Robertson was talking about God and carrying a Bible with a purple cover.
There's your cover.
That's the special edition, I believe. Robertson and the witness got into an argument, and Robertson again drew his handgun and pointed it at the head of a store employee. Robertson then shot a television screen that was displaying surveillance camera footage at the inside of the store. I don't know what shooting the screen does. You got to get to the camera.
Yeah, there. Now you'll never identify me.
Yeah. The witness ran out through a side door and retrieved his own handgun from his car. When Robertson walked outside, he started shooting at the witness, who returned fire. Now we got a full-blown battle going on.
You're never taking me alive, copper scenario.
That's right. Following the brief gun battle, during which neither man was hit, Robertson fled the scene. About 15 minutes after responding to the 7-Eleven shooting and less than an hour after they were called out to the Burger King, Aurora police officers were dispatched to yet another 911 call involving Robertson, this time from a woman who reported that her friend Eugene had just shot at her apartment. The woman said Robertson knocked on her front door, and when she refused to open it, fired at the door twice. He also shot once through a sliding glass door into the woman's apartment, where multiple people were present. Robertson lived in the same apartment complex, which is located less than a mile from Alameda and Buckley. Officers found the Audi that witnesses had said was involved in the two previous incidents parked nearby. While investigating the shooting at the complex, police spotted Robertson, who tried to escape on foot by running through a bush. When he emerged from the bush, an officer shot at him and missed. Robertson was then arrested. During his arrest, Eugene said he was not physically hurt, but his feelings were hurt, Scotty.
That almost brings a tear to my jaded eye. Was there something with him, this pattern of shooting at people? Did he finally go to his own apartment building and start shooting because he's like, they're never going to catch me because I've gotten away twice tonight already? He keeps shooting at people. Yeah. What's amazing to me is nobody's gotten hit through this whole scenario.
Yeah, it's a small miracle that nobody got hit. Yeah.
Wow.
Officers also learned that Robertson had an outstanding warrant in connection with a March 2021 case where Robertson was allegedly involved in a vehicle crash and shooting. There's a shock. Fled the scene, removed or lost his pants in the scenario, and flagged down an Aurora police officer who arrested him on suspicion of illegally possessing a firearm at that point.
Wow. Lost his pants. Interesting.
It's a talent. That's all I've got to say. It's a talent. How do you lose your pants in one of these deals?
I was wondering that. Was it like if they've got the dogs, I'm trying to throw the scent dogs off, we'll send my pants that way, me this way. How do you lose your pants? I don't know. Did he get it tangled in barbed wire like an old novel I read once? I wonder To Kill a Mockingbird. Kid gets his pants tangled in the barbed wire and he leaves them. I don't know.
Or is it one of those things like a little kid where you just start running down the street, you unbuckle and you run right out of them?
Yeah, like maybe he was one of those half down his ass cheeks pants wearers.
Who knows? And then he just finished the job.
I will honestly say, every time I've run from the cops, I have never lost my pants.
Robertson also spontaneously uttered that he was wearing white Nike tennis shoes and blue jeans prior to our arrival. In that case, so he did have stuff on. The same affidavit mentions that Robertson had previously served an 84-month sentence for felony distribution of crack cocaine, making it illegal for him to possess a firearm. He should have never been touching guns in the first place.
No, and how did he get his pants off over his Nikes if he's in the run?
Now, I can attest to this because with my Charcot foot condition, I do have to get pants on over a tennis shoe.
Okay.
So it can be
got a wide
yes.
Pantaloons.
Wide. I almost said pantaloons before you said it. So yes, pantaloons. Right. Yes, I do have a wide leg in my pantaloons.
Yes. One must.
Yeah. One must.
And it's multi-purpose.
I do not wear the skinny pantaloons. I wear the wide pantaloons.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there you go. So when shopping, gentlemen, look for the wide pantaloons. They always come in handy.
That's right. Good for getaways, good for pulling a cast on, over a cast, and
that's right,
etc.
That's right. And when shopping for a suit, look for the wider pantaloon as well, because you never know.
Yes.
I mean,
and I avoid the wide pantaloons because I grew up in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, that 70s show that was on TV?
Yeah.
They all graduated. I graduated the same year, 1978. And we were all wearing wide pantaloons in 1978, bell bottoms, flares. And now I avoid them like the plague. I just don't like them at all. It reminds me of the 70s.
The wide lapel is out now. The skinny lapel is in.
They're back in.
Yeah.
That's a good thing I didn't throw out all my skinny 90s ties.
Yeah.
That's back when we were dressing like, there was a time in the 90s where we all wanted to emulate Miami Vice.
Yep.
And so you would get pastel-y colored white or pale pink or pale aqua suit coats, and you'd wear the skinny little ties, or you would wear a T-shirt under it.
It's all back in. So there you go. Just
all coming back.
Dig it all back out of the closet.
Yes.
More 420 news here, Scotty.
All right.
This one, you were talking about the secondhand smoke earlier.
Yes.
I think you can get the wife and the brother-in-law. You could have drove them out to Oakland on 420. The whole family, you could have got the whole family together, and they could have stood outside this warehouse in Oakland, and everybody could have got their fill.
Nice.
It turns out that a blaze broke out at a marijuana grow warehouse in Oakland on 420. Talk about...
That's tragic.
It is tragic, but it is fortune befitting the fortuitous, if you want to put it that way. The fire started in an RV, then spread to a nearby cannabis growing site. Something tells me that was arson. I don't think that was...
If it spread to another cannabis site,
yeah,
must have been competition. Can you spell competition? Yes.
Not when high, no.
No. I'll think I can.
Yeah, exactly. A cannabis grow warehouse in East Oakland went up in smoke in the early morning of April 20th, or 420, culturally known as a stoner holiday to celebrate marijuana. The blaze broke out shortly after 4:20 a.m. at a lived-in RV parked just in front of a warehouse located at 1040th Avenue in East Oakland. 10 fire engines, Scotty, and nearly 60 firefighters responded to the 3-alarm fire and had contained it by 6:05 a.m. Pretty early in the morning for all those people.
Wow, 6 a.m. and the neighborhood is stoned.
Yep.
That's crazy.
That's a wake and bake, my friend.
Wake and bake.
That it is. Juana Ochoa lives 2 doors down from the cannabis grow facility. She woke up early to popping sounds and first thought that someone was lighting fireworks at 6:05 in the morning.
It happens in my neighborhood in Wisconsin, so.
Oh, there you go. When she opened up her front door to look outside, she saw an RV on her street bursting into flames. Ochoa watched as the flames climbed up towards electrical wires hanging overhead between 2 street lamps. The wires started emitting sparks, she said, and then dropped onto the warehouse, which then caught fire. She sat there and watched the entire thing happen. Do you think maybe...
I hope she filmed it on her camera.
I hope so too, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe she had
I could have called 911, but I would have had to shut down my camera.
Right.
So,
Do you think maybe she had a little wake and bake going on too?
Perhaps.
Probably. Ochoa, who has lived on this street with her family for 20 years, said she often sees some of the homeless people living in RVs starting fires to keep warm. They'll often just leave fires burning through the night and walk away, Ochoa said. Here you are, you're exposing everybody to danger, and look what happens. Why didn't you go put it out?
That's it. Or call somebody to put it out.
Right. It's unclear if the cannabis growing site was legally permitted. A security guard on site said that the owners were just starting out their business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, that sounds an awful lot like a competition arson. This town ain't big enough for both our marijuana joints. So I'm sure it's legal in California.
It is. Marijuana is legal in California, but business owners must obtain their licenses and permits to grow the plant commercially. So you may be right there, Scotty. Maybe there's a little competition between growers going on there.
Well, I watched the series Weeds with my wife a few years ago. But it was a single mom with teenage kids who she found the best way to make money was selling weed. I don't know if you ever watched that show or saw it.
Yep.
And she that show got pretty dark. It started as kind of a dark comedy to begin with.
Yes.
That got really dark towards the end. Everybody's trying to murder everybody and people are dying. And so.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like. You get into that racket and it seems safe on the front. You open a dispensary, it's a legal dispensary for pot. And the next thing you know, you got the cartels knocking at your door saying, look, we want a cut of what you're making.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Even, even here in Minnesota, the dispensaries are operated by the state, but now they're opening it up to private businesses coming up in the next year or two. And when you open it up to private business, even regulated by the state, we're now going to be opening ourselves up to whatever potential criminal element we may have. So
sure.
It's going to be interesting.
As if the state isn't enough of a criminal element to be running the show.
Look at that. See? Yeah.
Hey.
Let's move on. We're going to Alabama, where a Limestone correctional warden and his wife are facing drug charges. Speaking of the state becoming criminals.
Yes. The warden, that's the bad guys taking care of the bad guys there.
Yeah.
So
the warden at Limestone Correctional Facility and his wife have been arrested and are facing drug charges, according to the Alabama Department of Corrections. Warden Chadwick Crabtree. He kind of sounds like a. Doesn't he sound like a fictional?
He's
warden?
from Alabama. I'm Warden Chadwick Crabtree. You can just hear it now, boy. You don't do that in my prison. We'll make sure we hackle you. And, I can just see it.
He does sound like he should be chawing on some straw and
yes, probably wore a seersucker suit would be my guess.
Nightstick.
Yeah, fly swatter.
Yeah, just
what you're doing.
Yeah. And you probably should be chasing the bandit through while he's trying to haul Coors beer through his state. I don't know.
Coors beer.
Yeah. So Warden Chadwick Crabtree and Melissa Crabtree were arrested at their home on Friday by ADOC's Law Enforcement Services Division, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency's SWAT team, and the Limestone County Sheriff's Office. I'm willing to bet they weren't as important on the whole crime tree there, on several bench warrants. Both the warden and his wife were charged with second-degree unlawful possession of marijuana, unlawful possession of a controlled substance, manufacturing of a controlled substance, and possession of drug paraphernalia. They were taken to the Limestone County Jail. Irony of all ironies.
Oh, my.
Maybe they got to visit some of their customers. Court documents show the arrest of Chadwick Crabtree was made in connection with an incident in Limestone County on September 1st of 2022. The complaint says the charges are connected to the manufacture of psilocybin mushrooms.
Oh, do you manufacture those? It's funny. Don't you just grow those? You can grow psilocybin.
Yeah.
And my wife is always trying to get me to do legally psilocybin. You can buy stuff. It's like coffee. It's like, we've got your replacement coffee. It'll help you with your weight. It'll help you with your mental alertness. It'll help you with, your gout, whatever is bothering you. And Rainey says to me, you need to drink this stuff. It's called mud. And it's a tall, narrow canister.
Yeah.
And it says mud, just in neat little letters, kind of bronzy looking letters across. And I thought, okay, I'll try this. And I mixed it up, and it's very sludgy and brownish green. And I said to her, this is good. And she goes, well, you got to mix in the vanilla typey stuff that it sends with you. And so you mix that in, and you put in a little sugar or a little honey. You avoid sugar. Diabetic. I'm supposed to take it because I'm diabetic. So I avoid that. I put a little honey in, and you stir it all up, and it still tasted like dirt. It was aptly named mud. Sorry if they sponsor this show.
No, they don't.
But,
no.
I drank it. We both drank it for about a month. We used it up, and I said, honey, I'm going back to coffee bean. Juan Valdez is my friend. So
was it made out of psilocybin mushrooms?
It's something like that. Psilocybin is supposed. Well, now is psilocybin the hallucinogenic mushroom?
Yeah.
Psilocybin is supposed to be very good for treating cancer, for preventing cancer. And I mean, it's legit. It's a legit thing.
And it's supposed
if I've got the right mushroom in mind. But psilocybin, my wife said the word many times around here.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be good as far as treating PTSD.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of things that it's supposed to treat. Yeah. And I'm like, let's just do ayahuasca and skip the step and go right to seeing the giant snake.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
So yeah, psilocybin mushrooms is what they were manufacturing in quotes. Crabtree has been placed on mandatory leave, of course, without pay pending further personnel action, according to ADOC. Crabtree, an Elkmont native, has worked with ADOC for over 20 years and previously served as warden at the Birmingham County-based facility for women inmates. ADOC's website shows he is listed at the website as Warden 3, which is the highest rank an officer can have at a prison. ADOC says its law enforcement division also searched Crabtree's office at the correctional facility. And the investigation is ongoing, and officials said further charges may be pending. So they seem to think there's more there.
Well, yeah, well, you see, we use that for treatments down here. As a treatment, it's not a drug.
Let's move on to the next story. A woman called the cops over a bad batch of meth. That'll happen.
Oh.
We're continuing with our 420 edition of Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals with an Indiana woman who is facing a narcotics charge after she called 911 to report purchasing an inferior batch of methamphetamine and to say that she wanted to file charges against her drug dealer.
Oh, my goodness. As somebody who has a perception of what jurisprudence or law enforcement is all about, but doesn't really get all the angles. Yeah.
I just have to show you what somebody who gets a bad batch of meth looks like. And calling
that's exactly how I pictured her.
Yeah, and calling your drug dealer, and that's what she looks like. Yep.
And she's got a Nirvana T-shirt on.
She did, yeah. She called representing Kurt Cobain. All alleged in a probable cause affidavit. 34-year-old Sarah Harris twice made open line calls to the police emergency number, which prompted an officer to visit her residence to ensure that everyone was okay. During a conversation with a police captain, Harris declared that her meth was not what it was supposed to be. She explained that the drug left her feeling as if she was going to have a heart attack. Harris said she had snorted a line of the meth and felt something different when it touched her skin and nostrils.
Oh, my goodness.
Harris noted that she and a friend had smoked a bowl of normal meth before she subsequently obtained the meth that led her to call 911 earlier this year. Apparently believing that the local sheriff operated a better illegal business bureau, Harris requested that the drug be tested. Harris also declared that she wanted to turn the person in who provided her the meth. While speaking with police at her home in the city of Bedford, Harris made the mistake of handing over the meth that so vexed her. The contents of the small baggie, which carried a red pig design, later field tested positive for methamphetamine. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, my goodness. Surprise. Yes.
Yeah. As a result of Harris providing the narcotics evidence, a criminal information charging her with meth possession was filed last week, While the Class 6 felony carries a maximum 30-month prison term, the advisory sentence is 1 year. Harris's rap sheet includes convictions for theft. Here's a shock, Scotty. It also includes meth possession, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, resisting, and operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated.
Oh, my goodness.
So the young woman hasn't learned her lesson.
You know, there are people that my wife affectionately refers to as tweakers. Now, they're your meth users.
Yes.
It's mostly their physical characteristics of things they do. And I will tell you, I don't want to give you, and you know me, you've known me for years, decades you've known me.
Yes.
And I don't want to give your listeners, some of whom I know, I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm a regular user of any substance at all.
Well, yeah.
I barely drink anymore these days. I just don't have time. And I got kids.
Yep.
So my Scotch, I'm a single malt Highland Scotch aficionado. And I've always said I don't drink alcohol to play the inebriate, but to hobnob with my brother wizards. And so I drink once in a while. I smoke once in a while. I quit smoking. As you can see, I've got a pack right here on my desk.
Sure.
Just in case. I've had 2 cigarettes in the last 8 months.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
And didn't even finish them. But so I quit. But so I don't do a lot of it, but every time I've done it, I've got a story attached to it, you know? And I've never done meth. I've never done anything I think stronger than psilocybin or pot.
There you go.
But I will mention your last story reminded me. I didn't call the police or anything, but I was on the phone with somebody. I had my neighbor, who was an insurance salesman, came over. We lived on the east side of St. Paul, and he was slick, man. He was tall, good-looking dude, and sharp suits and ties. You know, he didn't wear your off-the-rack Dayton's, you know, or Bloomingdale's suits. He wore your Corleone and your Countess Mara ties, and, you know, he was slick. And he came over and he pulled out this little wooden block. And he says, "Do you smoke?" And I go, "Why, no, I've never tried." And on this wooden block, he pulls out this narrow gold rod, which is hollow for smoke, and he inserts it here, and he flips it open, and it's got weed in it.
Okay.
And so we smoked off of that, and I had smoked but 1 or 2 times prior. This is like 30 years ago.
Sure.
I was supposed to catch a flight the next morning to go to a convention, the NATP, the National Association of Television Broadcasters in Las Vegas. We had a booth there, and I totally forgot I had to schedule my flight that night so I could fly out. And I missed the deadline because I was stoned. And I remember, oh my God, I've got a call because of the special circumstances here. This is pre 9/11, so it was very different back then.
Yes.
And I called and I tried to put on my most articulate voice possible. And I'm sure I didn't, because I'm explaining to the woman, I got a little tied up and I'm sorry, I was supposed to call this in by 2 p.m. this afternoon. I completely missed the deadline to get this fare. Could you possibly? And I'm explaining away, and she's giggling on the other end of the line. Sure. She says, "Sure, I'll help you." And she's just laughing at me because she knew, however articulate I felt I was being, I came across as stoned as stoned AF, they say.
Oh my God.
So there you go. I got a story attached to every time I've ever smoked.
Oh my.
Anyway, carry on.
Well, let's
anecdotes.
Let's sober up a little bit, and we'll go to a sober story here. We're getting very close now to the not safe for work, the risque part of our program here, Scotty.
All right.
We have a little palate cleanser here before we jump into the deep end, so to speak.
All right. I like the deep end.
Pardon me. Hey, now.
Oh, pardon me.
We're going to Texas, where we have a candidate for Mother of the Year.
Oh.
A Texas mom went on a cruise and left her kids alone at home. This according to police. A Texas woman went on a cruise and left her children, an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, home alone in the family's $3,600 a month apartment in Houston.
Wow.
I think she's got some cash.
Yeah, she's got cash. So she could hire somebody to watch the kids if she needed to.
I think so, yeah. According to the criminal complaint, neighbors of Lakeisha Woods Williams, she's all of 29 years old, spotted her departing the luxury McKinley Apartments on April 4th with luggage and bags and never saw her return to the location. Aware that her children may have been left in the 21st floor apartment, which, by the way, had a small balcony.
Oh, yeah, you want to leave kids alone with the balcony on the 21st floor.
Yeah, okay. I sense an Eric Clapton situation happening here.
Yes.
A witness called police. Now, cops who visited the complex on April 9th discovered the 2 children in the apartment, which was in complete disarray and had trash and leftover food all over the unit and reeked of urine.
Well, see, the problem here was not leaving them home alone. The problem was the kids thinking they could do whatever they want because mom's not around, so they didn't do their chores.
That's right, yeah. And unfortunately, I don't think there was a housekeeper that came in during that time.
Wow.
The children told police that their mother had left them since April 4th of 2024 to go on a vacation on a cruise, and they did not know when she would return. The boy used a phone to text his mother while she was vacationing, and cops found a webcam that Williams allegedly was using to watch and talk to the children while she was away.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you imagine that?
No, I can't. As you know, I was a sole custodial dad of my 3 older children. Mm-hmm. My twin daughters are now 32. My son is 23. And when they were, my daughters, I believe, were 12 or 13, and my son was 9 years younger, so he was 4 at the time, so they were 13. I went to England and Wales and Scotland, mm-hmm. and a couple of friends. We went and pub and castle hopping for 2 weeks in England. But you know what I did? I made up a calendar. And I talked to certain people that were friends because their mother, who was my ex, she's like, I'm not going to take them and help you celebrate a vacation. You get your own way. So I said, fine, thank you anyway. Here's the calendar I set up so you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I had friends come and stay the night. Some people, Dave Potter, yep. He would come and cook for them and stay overnight. We had other people that would come. Friends of mine from the festival, and people would just come and do shifts just to hang out with my kids and watch my kids. I had it all lined up, and it was all on a calendar, printed out. I did it on the computer, the red lines, the yellow lines, the green lines, so everybody knew. And wow. I wasn't going on a cruise. I wasn't going to be out at the ocean. I was going to be on land. But I was on another continent. But there are things you do when you have small kids at home. Yeah. Now, could my 13-year-olds have stayed home? By law, you have to be in Minnesota 10 years old to be able to be left home alone, but not for 2 weeks.
No.
And so you do things responsibly. That's my anecdote to go along with that is when you're taking a trip, and I've done it, and I've left my kids at home, and I had an irresponsible mom. That's why she didn't have the kids, and I did. Yeah. You had an irresponsible mom that didn't want to help. I was fine with that. I was like, just offering. Thought you might want to have them a little extra time. I got it covered. Thank you. Bye.
Wow.
And you get it covered.
Wow.
I can't imagine being that irresponsible with your children.
I can't either. The children in this case were examined by emergency service personnel and subsequently released to the custody of their aunt. When contacted by police, Williams was uncooperative, refused to return to the residence, and was switching up her story on her whereabouts. That, according to the complaint and other court records. Now, after an April 12th court hearing, a judge ordered Williams, who was busted on a felony child abandonment count, locked up in lieu of $25,000 bail, not enough in my opinion, citing the egregious nature of this offense and witness accounts that this is not the first time something like this has occurred.
Oh, my goodness. And, you know, there's plenty of opportunities. When you're a single parent, sometimes you've got to get away. You love your kids, but I needed time away. I had every Tuesday night we went to the Irish pub. Mm-hmm. Our friends from the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, we'd all hang off season at the Dubliner, downtown St. Paul. Mm-hmm. And so we'd go down there. And sometimes you got offers, hey, come on over to our house and party. Or, hey, you want to come over to my place tonight? And I'm like, I'd love to, but you know what? I can't. I got kids at home.
Yeah.
Maybe another time.
Yeah.
And that's part of being a parent is you have to be responsible for your offspring.
Absolutely. Williams is scheduled for arraignment on June 11th. Now, according to a financial affidavit, Williams earns $6,000 monthly working full-time for a nursing service. She's lived for the last year in a 1,300 square foot apartment with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The McKinley complex features an outdoor pool, club room, library, fitness club, sports lounge, and private wine storage.
Well, that's probably why she thought she could leave her kids alone. Well, there's a workout facility, there's a wine cellar, they're set.
Yeah, the kids got it all.
The concierge will help.
That's right.
Honey, if you have a bad dream, just call the concierge while I'm gone.
That's right. They could tell you the.
And $6,000 a month ain't nothing to shake a stick at, especially if your rent is $3,600 a month. So that's more than half of your income.
Yeah, that's a lot to pay for rent. Yeah.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder though if she has somebody else helping her with the rent, or if she's got a little side business going.
Maybe a little side business. Maybe that's what took her on a cruise. Who knows?
Yeah.
And if she kept changing the story for her whereabouts, maybe she was doing something different. Who knows?
You never know. Interesting story here that's not necessarily, it involves a past dumb crime. But we're talking about the victim of that dumb crime.
Okay.
This story sent to us from a listener of ours, Tony. By the way, if you have a dumb crime, stupid criminal story for us, you can send it to us, tim@darknessradio.com. Here's the story here, Scotty. John Wayne Bobbitt is back in the news.
You saw something about him.
This time, it's because something else of his got cut off. His toes.
That's it. I remember seeing something about this.
Yeah. His toes were amputated 30 years after his wife, Lorena Bobbitt, cut off his genitalia.
Yeah, with the scissors.
Yeah. John Wayne Bobbitt was forced to have his toes amputated more than 30 years after his wife cut off his genitalia in 1993. John is now 57 years old and revealed to The Sun on April 13th that his toes were amputated due to toxic peripheral polyneuropathy. Easy for me to say.
It's neuropathy of the feet.
Yeah. The condition, believe it or not, was caused by his stint at the military base Camp Lejeune in North Carolina during his time as a Marine in the 80s.
So is he the one that's the target of all these lawsuit ads that you see every the pernicious ever present? If you served at Camp Lejeune from 1968 to 1974 or whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah, that's him.
Interesting.
Yeah. At the time, the camp's water supply was severely contaminated and had led to cancer and other ailments in people who spent time there. Now, according to the Mayo Clinic, John's condition often causes weakness, numbness, and pain, especially in the hands and feet. It can also affect other areas and body functions, including digestion and urination. The government covered it up for 40 years. The former Marine told The Sun they knew. They were testing the water, and it was like up to 3,500 times above normal safety standards. John told the publication that while the condition leaves his feet looking painful, he can't feel any of it due to the chronic nerve damage. On top of the nerve damage, John says he suffers from osteomyelitis, a bone infection that leads to ulcers and requires skin grafts. The toxic peripheral polyneuropathy has led to several surgeries for John, with the most recent being in 2023 when he had his remaining toes removed. John also said that the effects of the contaminated water likely led to the incident that ended in his penis being cut off by Lorena Bobbitt.
I got to tell you, too, there's a morbid curiosity that says, after 30 years, does that thing still work for you? And I'm not talking about his toes. You
never saw Frankenpenis?
I never did.
That's what that whole movie, that whole porno movie career
I'm sure
was about.
it was based on him. Yeah.
No,
I never saw that one.
It was him, and the whole reason he made the movie was to prove that it worked.
Right, he was in. Yes.
Yeah.
See, you just rattled that out of my memory now. Something I tried very hard to forget ever happened.
We should be
Thank
talking
you very
about.
much.
We should be talking about this and say this is our not safe for work part of our program.
Right.
But so kids, don't listen now.
Yeah. I was going to say, I remember Behind the Green Door. That was our favorite in the early 80s, but I never did see the Bobbitt movie.
So John says, I wasn't behaving the way I should have. Maybe I would have made better decisions in my cognitive functioning, and if it wasn't distorted by the chemicals. He's saying he cheated on Lorena. She cut off the schlong because of the water at Camp Lejeune.
Oh, my.
Do you buy that?
I don't buy that. I think my wife has been awfully angry with me at times, but I don't think if she's considered it, she never followed through, thank goodness. But when you cut off, when you do a non-aesthetic, aesthetics of the word, anesthetic, lack of anesthetic procedure to remove somebody's limb or somebody's appendage,
Yes.
that's pretty cruel.
Yeah.
So, I don't excuse her.
Now, for those of you who may not be, I can't imagine there's any of you who aren't familiar with what happened in 1993, in June of 93. Lorena, who is now 53, did use a kitchen knife to slice off John's appendage, as Scotty so eloquently put it, while he slept. She later threw the appendage out of the car window as she was driving around. It's cruel and unusual. But authorities later found the organ and successfully reattached it. The attack led to John and Lorena becoming household names as the trial dominated the headlines a little over a year later in 94. Lorena was acquitted due to temporary insanity. Now, did she drink the water at Lejeune?
And that's from drinking the water at Lejeune.
No. I don't know. I'm saying, did she? Did she? Can she claim that was from drinking the water at Camp Lejeune?
I never heard that claim. All I heard was she was pissed off, and it was like there are people who get off murdering people because they shoot their spouse in bed with somebody else. They've caught them and they shoot them. It was temporary insanity. It was that emotionally. There's a word for it that's beyond temporary insanity. I can't think of what it is.
Well, that's what Lorena essentially was acquitted due to temporary insanity. Right. Due to that, it was basically due to his cheating. But John does go on to say, and he went on to say in a docuseries called Scandal Made Me Famous in 2016, we both hurt each other, and I wish her the best. Now, Lorena is remarried. She found a nonprofit organization that focused on helping the victims of domestic violence. She also contended that John Wayne Bobbitt was essentially putting his hands on her too. That it wasn't just the cheating, but there was also some physical violence there as well. Sure, and that's what led to this.
I have heard all of that. At the time that it happened, we thought it was an extreme punishment. I mean, every guy who knows and lived through hearing that story, the John Wayne Bobbitt story has a sphincter factor of about 9.4. Yeah. Because we're all like, no. And the fact that they found it on the roadside, cleaned it off and reattached it is like a scientific miracle. Yeah. So, but the one question that still is in my mind is, how would you like to be known? Your one claim to fame for the rest of your life is that your wife cut off your cheating appendage. And that's the whole world knows you for that. I'd have been working very hard to do something very different. I'd have changed my name. I'd grown a beard and shaved my head. I'd have done something to look different and go into a different profession. Oh, yes, I'm a master of archaeology. That's it, archaeology. And as I twirled the end of my mustache. And you write your books and you do something very different. And if somebody finds out later, oh, aren't you the guy that had his penis cut off? And you say, yes, I am. But that was another life. And you've already built something else. I couldn't imagine just having that as my only claim to fame. It says something about the mentality of the guy who had his unit cut off.
Oh, but he leaned into it, man. He
leaned into it.
Literally leaned into it and said, hey.
I wonder how much he made off of his porn movie.
Did
you get enough to buy a new trailer? I'm curious. Sorry, all those of you who live in trailers, no offense.
At the time, he got quite the advance. I know that. Because
I'll bet, yeah.
It was, everybody wanted to see if you could reconstruct the oil dike, I guess, for lack of a better term. But
I suppose,
you gotta make sure that the thing still functioned. We've got 2 more stories here left for Dumb Crime Stupid
Got some
criminals.
good jokes.
Yes, we're going to lighten it up a little bit here. The last 2 stories here. Again, these are not safe for work stories, folks.
Sure.
So get the kids away from the listening devices. Here we go. We're going to Nebraska. And I want to thank our listeners for sending this story in. A Nebraska teacher is arrested after police find her, Scotty, and her teen student naked in a car.
Oh, I heard about this story.
Yeah. A Nebraska high school teacher was jailed on Monday after officials said they found her naked in a car with her teenage student after a car crash. 45-year-old
car crash.
Yes. 45-year-old Aaron Ward, a substitute teacher at Omaha Public Schools, was arrested over the weekend on 1 count of first-degree sexual abuse by a school employee after she admitted to having sex with the teen boy. According to Hansen, and then this is Sheriff Aaron Hansen, just before 3 a.m. on Saturday, this is a week ago Saturday, deputies responded to a call regarding a suspicious vehicle parked on a dead-end road in a neighborhood in Elkhorn, Nebraska. Elkhorn is a neighborhood on the western side of the city of Omaha, Nebraska. Now, according to a press release from the sheriff's office, arriving deputies found 2 people in the backseat of a gray Honda Pilot, which is not a big car.
Not a big car.
We're already starting at a disadvantage. One who jumped into the driver's seat sped off and crashed into a yard 2 blocks away. After that crash, the release continues. Deputies reported seeing a teen boy without clothes get out of the Pilot and get out of that driver's seat and flee the scene.
Leaving the teacher. Okay.
Leaving the teacher, Aaron Ward, undressed and in the back seat of the car. That same time, according to the release, the other person, as I mentioned, identified by deputies as Ward, was putting her clothes on in the back seat. After officers found an Omaha Public Schools employee ID in the car, Ward told deputies she's a substitute teacher for several schools in the district, including Burke High School. Deputies also said she admitted to having sex with the teen, who is a 17-year-old boy from one of the high schools that she worked for. Just over an hour later, the release continues. I hate saying the word release, and then the 2 we're talking about. Deputies located the teen in a nearby neighborhood wearing only boxers, a T-shirt, and socks.
Pardon me, young man. Just out for a stroll, officer.
Yeah.
Just imagine, he's 17. If she'd have waited 4 more months,
right, right,
or however. Yeah.
The victim was it's not even ethical then.
No.
She's a teacher, so it's not even ethical.
Right.
The victim was transported to a safe place to receive care and be interviewed. I hate to keep saying this, but the release stated both, and he did get released, let me tell you. Both the teen and Ward were treated for minor injuries from the crash. Ward was released I'm sorry, Ward wasn't released. Well, she did get released, but Ward was arrested and booked into the local jail at that point. Omaha Public Schools spokesperson Bridget Blevins said Ward substitute taught for the district starting in September of 2023, but was not considered a full-time or part-time employee. So she's an independent contractor?
Independent contract. Yeah, a lot of the substitute teachers are.
Okay.
They're independents.
Burke High School principal Darren Rasmussen wrote to parents in a letter obtained by USA Today, they will not be returning to our school or any other in our district. Our top priority is always the safety and well-being of our students we serve. We take this most seriously. Rasmussen added counselors will be available during the next few weeks for students in need of support. A jail spokesperson said Ward was being held without bond on this past Monday. It was not immediately known if she had obtained an attorney or when she is scheduled to appear before a judge on the felony charge.
Wow.
Interesting here, Scotty, that, okay, so her employment status is a little up in the air. It isn't now.
A little,
I mean, she's, but she was an independent contractor, so she probably felt like she wasn't doing anything wrong at the time because technically she's not an employee.
A 45-year-old woman and an 18 to a 20-year-old man, we'd call her a cougar. You take it a few months earlier and put her in a teaching position, and you call it dastardly. You call it obviously. Well, she'll have a sex offender record for the rest of her life now. Well, because this kid was 17 and not 18.
Well, I was going to say, in a pedophile's mind, she could stretch this in a couple different directions. And what I was going to say before is, in her mind, okay, so she's an independent contractor. She's not technically an employee. He's 17. He's almost 18. So he's there. He's an adult.
Almost an adult, yeah.
And in some states, 16 is the age of consent. So she could stretch things here and say, well, it's all good and dandy, and we're there. And she could convince herself that she's in the right here, or that she's got enough legally to play with. She didn't. She had no right. Right. She was not in the right in any of this.
Right.
So yeah, I could see where she's
so many ethical boundaries, not just ethical, legal boundaries and ethical boundaries were crossed and stretched for this to happen. Now, take that out of the setting they're in and say there's a 45-year-old woman that in a state where you can have legal consent at 16 beds a 17-year-old kid who is not probably a young-looking kid. He's probably looks adult enough and acts adult enough, although we know 17-year-olds are not adults at all,
right?
Even if they physically resemble them. But you could say in a state where that age is legal, you might shake your head and tisk a few times and go, lady, what's the matter with you that you've got to bed a 17-year-old? And yet on that, let's go to the other side of that equation. Look at it and say, if there's an attraction there. Here's the thing. I have known people in my ministry days where there was an older woman. She was in her 40s. Sorry, women in your 40s. You're younger women to me now. But older woman than a 17-year-old. And there was a 17-year-old. And it was in the state of Minnesota. And they were very involved. She was not an authority figure over him. They were involved. And you could see where that attraction would be there between them. She was a very good-looking mid-40s. He was a very good-looking, strapping 17. And this happened. It was still illegal.
Yeah.
And there's still a crime being committed. And it was all caught, and it was handled by a church. And the church just said, we're not going to do anything because the kid's now 18. We're just going to move on from this, and you guys should have no contact or whatever. I don't even know how they resolved everything at that point. But I spoke to that woman a few years ago. Just ran into her and said, and she was over the top Bible, oh, praise God for his amazing grace. He has saved me, and I am just and that's all she could talk about. Well, how are you? What's going on? Well, I am just living in the grace of God. And this happened when I was a youth pastor. I was 26 years old when she was 45. So she's now in her mid-80s. Mm-hmm. But so she's an older woman. But these people get themselves into these situations. And there are times, like, I look at my own situation. I go, my wife is 20 years younger than me. I'm 63. She's going to be 44. She's going to be the age, in a week, she'll be the age I was when I met her. And then we got together and we got married. And we've got 3 kids. That's a little different. She wasn't a minor. So the age difference is not the thing. Mm-hmm. It's when we have, as a society, has said, at this age you can, this age you can't.
Yeah.
Do not touch, do not handle, do not break the seal, you know?
Well, and it's a maturity thing, though.
It is.
Yeah. It's not necessarily the age, it's the maturity.
When I first started dating my wife, mm-hmm. like I say, I was 44, she was 24. And I had guys saying to me, Scotty, I remember he had a gruff voice. Scotty, he says, only problem with women at 24, they don't know what the hell they want. That was his advice to me. Mm-hmm. He says, so I wouldn't get involved. And I say, my wife knew very well what she wanted. Mm-hmm. And you've met Rainey, you know Rainey. Mm-hmm. And and here we are 20 years later mm-hmm. with 3 kids. And so age difference isn't the problem. It's, yes, there's a maturity level. I think there's a hell of a lot of maturing in girls between 17 and 25 versus guys between 17 and 25. Yeah. I'm still 26 in my brain.
Yeah.
So you know how that goes. And hopefully this is a long, big, hard topic to talk about.
Sure.
Especially when you look at all the ramifications and all the different angles. And I don't want anybody out there to think, oh, Scotty, let's see, he does drugs. He's okay with and now he's okay with his 17. And no, I'm not okay with it.
No.
I'm just saying our society does some really dumb, awful things.
Yeah.
They do dumb, acceptable things, but they're dumb. What you want to do, as long as you aren't messing with a minor or breaking the law, it's none of my business. And so I look at that situation and say, she broke the law.
Yes.
He was a minor. She broke ethics. She was a teacher.
Yes.
She's going to suffer for that.
Yeah.
And I think even if she doesn't do time, I think she's going to have this on her record probably the rest of her life, unless this is so recent, we don't know how it's going to come out. Maybe she's going to go to court and they're going to accept her. In some states, it's 16 years old. So it all depends on what your state is going to legislate.
I think she'll be reporting as a sex offender for quite a while.
I think you're right.
Yeah, that's for sure. We've got one more story here, so let's get to that story, and then we'll be done for the day here. This one I find, I told this story to a mutual friend of ours, and he's like, there's no way you could be busted for this. If so, every man would be busted in his dreams. We'd all be in jail. Here we go. This woman was busted for seeking a threesome.
You can get arrested for that?
I guess so. This suspect, 31 years old, had forced her way into her neighbor's apartment. A Louisiana woman, last night, actually it says last night here, but it was on April 19th, forced her way into a male neighbor's home and sought to initiate a threesome with the victim and his girlfriend.
Oh.
Dispatched to an 11:15 p.m. harassment complaint at an apartment complex in Monroe, Louisiana, a patrolman was told that by the man that upon answering a knock at his door, an unknown neighbor forced her way into the residence. Now, Scotty, I don't disparage anybody for their looks, but if this woman right here forced her way into your apartment, are you calling the cops?
I don't disparage her. She's probably a beautiful soul on the inside. But if she forced her way into my apartment,
my
house, and wanted to have a three-way with my wife and I, I'd
You're calling the cops?
if I couldn't get her forced back out the door, I'd be calling the police too.
I think so. Yeah. Me too. Just saying.
Not to disparage anybody, and not
Right,
to say, hey,
I'm
look,
sure.
if you got that desire, that's cool.
that's
Thanks
right.
for the compliment,
That's
but no
right.
thanks.
I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure she's a wonderful woman. I'm sure she's very nice.
Listen to us. I'm sure she's a wonderful woman. Beautiful soul.
I'm sure she remember my birthday every year.
Sings in the choir at church.
Yep. I'm sure she gives to charity.
I'm sure she does.
I don't know who Charity is, but I'm sure she's given it to her, whoever she is.
Yep.
But
what if it wasn't the husband that she was drawn to?
that's right. See, that's why I'm going to continue reading the story. We'll find out here. So the woman, the victim said, began trying to have sexual activities with him and his girlfriend. That according to a probable cause affidavit. While the alleged late-night incursion, however, did not result in any three-way action, a woman did end up in handcuffs. It just wasn't the one we're thinking of.
Pardon me, are these your handcuffs, sir? The ones with the lavender fur? Yes.
Yeah, no, these were the steely, hard kind, if you know what I mean.
Really hard guy.
A police canvass of the area located the female suspect at a nearby Circle K. She was identified by cops as Shadana Rationette Hurd, all of 31 years old.
There's too many. Oh my God, there's too many jokes to walk into that when she's found at the Circle K.
That's right.
So go ahead.
Evidently, you ain't heard us correctly. Don't come knocking down my door for a threesome. The male victim confirmed Hurd as the suspect. Hurd was arrested on April 19th in the early morning and charged with unauthorized entry of an inhabited dwelling, which is a felony, and several misdemeanors, including disturbing the peace, like everybody's peace.
That's right.
Criminal damage and resisting an officer.
Oh my.
As opposed to irresisting an officer.
Yes.
Hurd is locked up in the local parish jail. And I hear she kind of gets off on that. So there you go.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that's how we wrap up Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals today.
And that's all we know about her, huh?
That's all we know about her. I just just so you can catch her one last fetching time.
Yeah,
there
it
she
is. There she is, folks.
Yeah, there.
In all her glory.
In all her glory. Well, if she were to send you a little pic there in the old email system, would you? How do you?
I'd say.
How do you turn her down gently?
I'd let her down gently. If she was breaking down my door, I probably wouldn't let her down gently. If she was a neighbor, though, they probably knew her.
Yeah.
And that's why they probably let her in. I don't think she broke the door down.
No.
Did she? So
well,
they let her in, find out the neighbor is, wanting a little more than a cup of sugar.
Well,
she wanted the whole bag of sugar. And so
it probably wouldn't be hard for her to break down the door either.
I guess. My goodness.
So if old Shadana Rationette's at the door and she says, Scotty, I'm just saying, you and Rainey, if you want, I could be the extreme double serving of meat in between your sandwich.
I'd be like, Shadana, thank you for the very kind offer. I'm flattered. Truly, but it's, my wife and I, we kind of took this vow thing that we're not going to do other people like that. And so thank you, though. Thank you.
But Scotty,
see ya.
But Scotty,
Good night.
Shadana could be the filling in your reverse Oreo.
She could be the reverse Oreo filling. Definitely. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just not
going to happen. No.
Not with her. Now, let's say, True Confessions. If it was, what's her name? The Latin American, is she Latin or Hispanic? Who was in the Family Show? The
Family Show?
The guy who used to play Al Bundy plays the dad. What was the show called? With all the kids growing.
I know who you're talking about. She just got divorced.
Family Show. Yeah, Viraga.
Sofia Vergara.
Sofia Vergara.
Yeah, oh,
now,
yeah.
if she came knocking on the door,
Wouldn't kick her out of bed for
it was like,
yeah.
And it was like, well, come on in. What's on your mind?
What's
Can
on
I
your
get you a cup
mind?
of tea?
A cup of tea. It's got mushrooms in it. But,
psilocybin tea. I see.
Yeah.
So maybe our standards are sometimes set by other elements. There are certain things that you won't ever cross this line, and there's times you go, I'd consider the line.
And Scotty's, Scotty's standards are a Latin
I'm a
accent.
drug addict. And,
a Latin accent and a big set of tits.
Yes.
And we figured that out, folks. That's all we
I think there's so much multidimensionality out there in people.
Sure.
We have standards. Standards don't mean you don't think about things. It means there are things you don't act on.
Right.
There's things you don't do. And I think, that would probably be one of them.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you.
Shadana would be one of them.
No, I understand.
All right. I'm going to just keep digging my hole deeper. Shut up.
Well, I'll pull you out of it. I mean, I won't pull you out of Shadana's hole, if you know what I mean. Anyway, we're at the end of our program. Scotty, tell people where they can find you on your program.
You can find me on my program. I am Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Central. Over on the best way to find me is my YouTube. YouTube.com/Scotty Roberts. Easy enough. Scotty with a Y, by the way. I couldn't find you. I kept typing Scottie. Is it Scotty IE is a girl's name. Scotty Y is a boy's name.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a boy. So that's where you can find the show. 9 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday Central. 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. left coast, like 2 in the afternoon in Australia tomorrow.
Yeah.
So time travel. But that's the best place to find me. Type in my whole name, ScottAllenRoberts.com. It's my website. You can see all the cool, fun stuff I get to do.
There you go. All right. Folks, that'll do it for today. Tomorrow on the big show, Jessica Freeberg will be with us, and we will be doing Supernatural News on Thursday. We have Aaron Deese joining us. We'll be talking about Dogman in the Tennessee Valley area. So that's all this week on Darkness Radio. So that'll do it for Scotty Roberts. I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for joining us today on True Crime Tuesday.